Good afternoon, everybody. It is 4:30 and I would like to call the regular board meeting to order. I'd like to move on to the first item. Just as a note, Dr. Pingarelli will not be present. Moving on to item number 2, a motion to accept the agenda.
No, we're going to public hearing.
So sorry, public hearing. So a motion to go into public hearing.
There's no motion.
Okay. Oh, no motion. So it says a motion to it. It says first thing is a motion to adapt the agenda as presented.
Go up a little bit higher.
Oh. I'm no wonder. Okay. But it says number 2 on opening items and I had scrolled up. So the other number 2 on public hearing. All right. We are in a public hearing. And at this point, I would invite Mr. Ken Hicks to come forward and discuss our budget.
Good evening, Mr. President, Pro Tem, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Spurgeon, colleagues and community members. Thank you very much for allowing me to present our revised budget, our first revised budget of 2024, or second. Here's the first. It is first. So our first revised budget. Each year, by the end of October, every school district is notified by ADE if they're required to revise their budget or not. The laws changed about 8 years ago that if you're over budget by 1% or more, you are required to revise your budget. They would like to know, do you have a plan in place if your budget goes down? If your budget goes up, they don't really care. It's up to you to revise your budget to capture all capacity, which you will do, which everybody does by May 15th each year. So we did fall into the category of being over budget. And so they identified and sent us a letter on October 30th that we're required to revise our budget. Anytime that you revise your budget, you're required to have a public hearing. So this satisfies those requirements. All right, so I will just go through in general, just some of the major highlights, and then you can ask any questions if you have. But so these are the new budget limits. So 53 million in M&O, 54 million in capital, 32 in classroom site fund, bond 51. Looking at our maintenance and operations, last year you had a $42 million budget. We proposed a $54 million budget this year. It did have higher student count. And so what this is you have a reduction based on student count, but we have an increase because of our carry forward. So between the two, you have just a little bit, and to add a third, which I'll hit in another one. We took $2 million out of our DAA and moved it over to M&O to align it to be a very similar budget than what we proposed. I did also run a budget expense report just to make sure that our expenses are in line and that we're doing okay and that this amount is good. And we are fully in line and still expect to have a carry forward at the end of this year with that, based on that GD. Classroom site fund didn't have any changes, so I didn't really look at it. So just left it the same. Our capital outlay, as you said, so we had a reduction in students, we had a reduction from the carry forward from what was expected and anticipated, and then we took 2 million and moved it over. So this is where you're seeing an $8 million reduction from budgeted of 62 million to 54 million. And then our bond, because it's a bond building, nothing changed on that, and so that is fine. So left that as well. So I will say one of the questions that came up during the AFR that was asked to look into was using $6 million of our capital outlay to buy down our tax rate or to pay off some of the debt service. So I had to work with financial advisors with Stifel. So I met with Stifel to go over it because although legally you can do that, the USFR does not allow that transaction to happen out of capital. So what we're looking is how can we still do that and be compliant? And so working with Larry, we talked with Stifel. There is a way to do it, and it's when the program ends, whatever is left can then be used to buy down the tax rate, be transferred to debt service. So what is in bond building can be transferred over to debt service, working with the county treasurer, and then you could use that to pay down the tax rate. So what our goal is we will leave $6 million left in the bond building fund, use the capital outlay to support it as we've identified, and the projects. And then when we're done, we'll call the county and say, please transfer the remaining balance over. So that was an outstanding question that I've never heard of. Yes, it's legal. Nobody had ever told me how to do it, so I did research on how to do that. That doesn't really, that means we have to still continue to focus on spending down the bond building fund, which I know it's being worked on, and so that is the budget revision. And I know that there were some ADM questions, and so we went like this with ADM. That is natural, not natural when you get a brand new system. That when I think I saw the 430, that kind of made my heart jump a beat a little bit. But as we've been working internally, we knew the numbers were higher, so we know we didn't have a budget of 430 students. But this budget is built on 6519, and currently right now I believe we're at 6886, I believe, and growing. So when we revise in May, we will be revising upwards with an increase in students.
Okay, so is that as of today?
As of the last, I don't know what today is. Every day you upload, it will recalculate. The 6519 was based on, I think it was November 22nd data. And so I think when I saw the 6886 was last week, I pulled it. So I don't know what that data capture rate was to get the 6880 in.
Yeah, because I called the Department of Education on December 10th and they said it was 6693.
Which is even higher than the 6519, but I did run a report. I thought it was last week that I saw it at 6886.
I do have a question on the M&O because I had looked at their aggregate expenditure report from the Department of Education. And what they had calculated for the M&O was $10,082 and, you know, change, whatever. And we had budgeted 54 million. And so it exceeded our limit by $43 million. That's like, you know, I understand that, you know, we could have a problem in the SIS program in updating it, but that's a lot.
Mr. President, Pro Tem and members of the board, the ADE calculates whatever we send them. So whether you have a problem with your SIS system or not, if you only send them 430 ADM, they're only going to calculate what we send them. So we might know that we have 7,000 students here. They don't care about that. They care what have you submitted that's passed integrity. So it goes through integrity checks and everything. And if everything's failing, they pay us the first 2 months based on our estimate because we proposed a budget and adopted a budget. After that, they move over to actual.
Okay, so it was an error on our part.
Correct.
That was okay. Do you mind asking who?
I don't know.
So I'll talk about this a little bit later. It's only the very last item, but our SIS system called Focus, there were new business rules that were adopted last spring and the system wasn't changed over to the new business rules. So everything we sent them came back as errors. So until that system was migrated over to the new business rules, which we finally got to, that's when the system started correcting all of those errors. So for an example, our original budget was 88,375 ADM. So if you take that number, and I'm going to talk about this at the end, I'll probably just repeat this again. So if you took that number and they paid us for 8375 based on the 450 number they had, they would have overpaid us $43 million by the end of the school year. But because the system caught that, it said, wait a second, you're not at 8375. The system shut down, stopped paying us. That's why they owe us money now. So we don't owe them a penny. They actually owe us by $4.5 or $5 million now because they underpaid us based on the system catching that glitch in October or September.
Yeah.
And then I have another question too. So these numbers that are revised, that is a revised projection.
Mr. President, Pro Tem, members of the board, that's based on the 40-day numbers that they provided. But every time you upload to ADE, they will recalculate everything. And so your 40-day could be recalculated.
So those are actual
They're
numbers.
actual numbers every single time, but we will continue to get updated numbers. We have not hit the 100th day. Even after the 100th day, you can continue to revise because if you send up with a code and maybe somebody's on concurrent enrollment, something else, somebody enrolled somewhere else, you're going to get fractional enrollment. It will continue to change all the way through May.
Okay.
And actually, we don't get our final numbers until July or August after the year's done. So
Okay.
that's when it's final is when we get the very final.
All right.
You know, you got a question.
It's very usual and normal to revise a budget. That's for the sake of the audience. And All school districts have to do it. Question I have is, did we budget for every dollar that we could budget?
President Pro Tem, members of the board, we do. So when we put in the numbers of the 6519, so I took the number that I had a report from state, plugged it into the system, it calculates what the budget limit is, and then we push that into our M&O budget. So yes, we captured all the money that was allocated to us.
Thank you.
At that point in time, at that point in time.
Yeah, it changes. That's why we have to revise.
Correct.
Any other,
Good, thank you.
Mr.
So do we have a projection that goes out maybe 3 years to show that we're always gonna be in a good standing, or to alleviate any concerns in case we run into a situation where we think we owe $40 million? We can still look at that and say, well, we're still in good standing because we still have that fund somewhere else. Is there a way to project, you know, going over a couple of years rather than just a sight picture right now? Because as you said, these numbers can change. And every time you go in there, it's a living number, so it changes. Something more reliable would be a projection that is pretty solid or underestimated. Do we ever put anything together like that?
Mr. President Pro Tem, members of the board, I'm not aware of our projections. If we have that in place, I will tell you that most districts do not have that. You're really working on the very next year. So by October, you're starting to work on your projections for next year. Being current year funded is more important to understand the funding that year. So, and you're doing your staffing and sending out contracts. So that is the biggest. And then it's the first 10 days because of the 10-day drop rule when you come back. And so that's a huge. You can still put in projections going out. I normally do it for capital for up to 3 years. Everything changes so much in Arizona school finance and everything that it doesn't need that. But I would also say to have a fund of just $40 million that you never touch, just in case something like this happens. This didn't happen. This was an era of codes and integrity passing. So there was never, we were overspent by or over budgeted by $43 million. That's it was just a timing of errors and not getting the right data to the ADE to calculate it properly. So there was never a point that we were overspent. So I would not say, let's just sit on $40 million forever just to make sure that we're to cover that. I don't think that's good for the students that you're budgeting for and trying to provide the right services for.
Yeah, 40 was just an arbitrary.
Yeah. Well,
But it could be something or anything, but I don't know, I just wondering, you know, for that forecasting for us to be able to look at and see that whether or not we're in a safe spot. Rather than, you know, the minute something hits us, we're all of a sudden struggling and scrambling to figure it out.
So
Mr.
I
President
would
Pro
just add that, you know, as a district, we always put excess into our capital as kind of our rainy day fund. So we have over $50 million in our rainy day fund that we earn a little bit of interest. And that's why we took $6 million to pay off bond. It's like we don't spend, so we're not a district that spends every dollar we get. We're one of the few districts that operates that way. So I think that's what you're asking. Dr. Spurgeon.
So two things. Number one, because Arizona is a choice state, it's very difficult to make predictions. If you weren't a choice state and you could matriculate the grade levels from kindergarten to first, second, and so forth all the way through, that's a more reliable number. But because students move so much here, you know, what you may have this year, you may lose 10% or gain 10% year after year, and it's hard to budget that, you know, year after year. And then what Mr. Strzok said, you know, I'm a firm believer in leaving, you know, plenty of money in our capital always for a rainy day. And so even when we do our projects now, we're probably going to leave between $20 and $25 million probably most of the time in there. So we always have some extra money just in case something goes south or something bad happens for us. But the earlier question was, we never really ever were overpaid $43 million. That never happened. The system wouldn't allow that to happen in the first place. That was just a report. Here's the other thing that I talked to ADE about. Is in previous states that I've worked in, when you submit your ASBR, which was with Missouri's, and ours is the AFR. If you have issues, it automatically generates an edit letter, and it comes directly to the CFO or business official and the superintendent. So you can click on that link, takes you right to the issue that they're having. You can correct it and resubmit it. When Arizona, when that piece of information came out, Ms. Boozin, that you spoke of, we don't, I never knew it existed. I think Mr. Weeks actually happened to find it when he was doing some research on finance for West-MEC. He saw that, but I didn't see that document until like July the 1st. So it's not automatically generated unless you're in business, you just don't even know that it exists. So now everybody's kind of learned a lesson, like, wait, there might be a report out there, everybody go check it out. But in other states, it actually reports it to you or sends it to you by email so you can correct it.
Yeah, I stumbled upon it. I was like, what? So, yeah, but another thing I wanted to, how do we calculate LBM, ADM?
So wait, can I get some do you mean, how does the state pay us on ADM, or how do we?
Project how much ADM we're gonna have.
So my understanding would be that's based on student enrollment. 1,000 kids enroll, we project 1,000 kids, and we have a 99% retention rate. So we probably, knowing the district being a little conservative, probably calculates 98%. But that's how we would calculate our enrollment. But then I think the other part of the question that's also relevant is, how does the state calculate ADM?
Right, and that's one of the questions that I was talking to them about, and they said because we had projected 8,300 students enrollments. And then they came up with the number that we actually have, and so they consider us still, that we exceed our limit, and until we change that top number.
But our budget, if you bring that number back up, our budget was on, what did you say, 6519, and so it's a small, it's nowhere near I don't know where 40 million, and as Mr. Weeks said, ADE just doesn't allow us to overstate. We have to without errors, and that's only what we get paid on.
President Pro Tem, members of the board, I will say that what the question you asked is a very good question, is how does ADE calculate ADM? And it is not as simple as everybody thinks. I did a presentation last week and spent a half hour talking about it and the misconceptions about it. And so because they're only counting for the first 100 days. And it's on membership, not attendance. And so that is another misnomer. People think it's only on attendance. And so membership doesn't start until they actually show up and fully enrolled. So both of those have to happen and then they start. So if somebody wants to start in West-MEC and says, hey, and I'll just start tomorrow instead of today, that one day just costs you 1/100th of your total funding because we're currently funded. And so you add up all of those in fractional enrollments with people coming in, and 4 or 5 kids might only be generating 3 ADM. And so it is misleading a little bit when we say, hey, what's your enrollment, or what are we getting paid on? Well, those are 2 completely different things. What's your ADM? Oh my gosh, now that's another different thing. And do we have limitations? Because if they're enrolled in multiple systems, the state's gonna limit it down to a certain amount. And so we all have to take a fractional less. And so it's a very difficult question, and people get frustrated when we ask, well, what do you really want to know? What exactly you're trying to get at, because it's complicated in that sense.
Okay. So when you originally had that 8,300 and then it drops down to 6,693, that's a big drop. So what happened to those kids?
Well, first of all, it was an over projection. That number probably was way too high to begin with. So that was a mistake from the previous budget submitted in July of 2024. It should have been. We're not sure exactly the answer to that question. We've tried to find out where that number came from, and we can't. It was the best project at that time based on the report that was submitted in July. The other thing, Mr. Strucker, the other thing to keep in mind about ADM is that in CTE, we're paid by 1 fractions. So 0.75 for each of our central students, then 0.25 for each student that sits in the CTE program at our CTE high schools. So it's fractions of fractions of fractions. How we're paying.
Well, yeah, they don't make it easy.
Any more questions from the board on the budget? I want to make sure we kind of stay on the agenda. Dr. Pingarelli would be proud of me, I think. And is there anyone from the public that would like to address the budget? All right. If there's no
I think we should thank Mr. Hicks and Mr. Weeks for stepping in and taking
Yes,
care
sir.
of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hearing no more questions, I believe we can just conclude our public hearing. And now it is 4:50 and I will call the regular meeting to order. I will move on to item number 2. A motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Miglorino,
I am vehemently and positively opposed to the agenda as presented. I see absolutely, positively no need for an executive session. And I would like a written response as to why the executive session was called for and who called for it.
I believe Dr. Pingarelli called for it. And I am not able to respond beyond that.
Well, they just send me a written response. But I am opposed to the agenda as presented.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I will approve it. I'll first, yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. And we have Mr. Miglorino. I believe you're asking to remove the executive session.
Correct.
Is there a second to remove the executive session?
I'll second it.
Okay, so that would be an amendment to
Motion,
the motion.
motion to adopt the agenda with the exclusion of the executive session.
Exit out of this one.
So what do we do?
So we're gonna have, so if I'm, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn. The first motion will be to remove the executive session from the agenda. We will vote on that. And then that's like the amendment. And so we'll see how that goes. And then the next motion is Mr. Ramirez's and Ms. Bosom's, and that's to approve the agenda as presented. So first we'll,
To remove the.
so first one is yours.
And then approve it with it removed.
Correct. So we'll vote on whether we approve or,
Ms. Brown, would you put it back out?
So, question, there is an action discussion item, E1, that is tied to the executive session. Would you like to remove the executive session and item E1 from the agenda? The E1 ties to the executive session.
yes.
Yes, to remove.
So your motion is to remove D, executive session, and E, action discussion from executive session.
So E to, no. Like this.
That one motion was made by Jim, seconded by you guys get it?
No.
No.
In fact, B looks like it disappeared completely. If I can get some notes in there.
Is there, while we're waiting for that to come up, is there additional discussion on the motion?
Well, can you add something to that or?
What is your,
Well, if I want to say something, you know. Jim
yep,
said
so that we're why don't we have discussion while we're waiting for the item to come up?
I think there was a couple of things that popped up that warrants an executive session to talk to our attorney about. And I would like to have it.
I would, my concern, I would like to have the executive session as well, and my thought there is, it is good to get the advice of an attorney regarding some items that could be actioned by the Auditor General. And I just want to get clarity. We don't have to take action out of executive session, but I think going behind closed doors with the board's attorney could be in our interest.
I vehemently disagree with that. You're gonna have an executive session, you need to have a reason.
I think we have good reason.
I have seen absolutely no good reason to have an executive session. That's why I vehemently objected to one. There's a time for an executive session. This isn't one of them. And if it deals with anonymous, and we don't, if you're in management, you don't deal with anonymous things. There'll be another one and another one. Can you imagine handing a judge an anonymous letter and say, I want you to take this? Doesn't happen. And it shouldn't happen at West-MEC.
Okay, my motion to remove executive session.
Anonymous letter.
Never, operable word, never pay attention to an anonymous letter.
It might
And I'm surprised our attorney didn't tell us that.
So I think there's a fine line here. You know, there is,
Always make a fine.
but it's just, here's where I think the board has to decide this item. You know, we do have a policy about anonymous letters,
Correct.
and if anyone ever wants to talk to the board, you can contact Kathy Mays and they will give you our phone number or email to personally contact the board. I think because we shouldn't consider anonymous communication, but the other part is the Auditor General and Attorney General have made it clear that they expect a governing board and a school district to ensure compliance with procurement laws. And that's where I think we have to decide that item here. And so as far as the uniform systems of a records for a school district. So that's where I think we're at.
Mr. Straka, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I've heard this stuff about the Auditor General. That's a scare tactic. I'm sorry that everybody's not here today, but enough is enough. If the Auditor General is gonna look at you, let him look at you.
And I think it's something that we should trust but verify and be sure. It will
We
take
don't
you.
need an executive session. There's nothing wrong with looking into
It would be
things.
nice to talk to an attorney to get their opinion.
The only thing the attorney gets is billable hours. I'm sorry.
I'd rather cover our butt than time.
All right. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I'll call for the question. If everybody could please vote. So what the motion is a yes vote removes the item and a no vote keeps it in place. Am I correct on that? I just want to make sure everyone,
Remove it.
Yes.
a yes vote removes it, a no vote keeps it. So we have a tie, so motion fails. All right. So then we come back to the original question of approving the agenda as presented.
As modified, as
It's
revised,
changed,
as
revised.
revised.
Take the executive session out.
But
The motion failed,
motion failed.
so the agenda proceeds as presented.
I thought with a tie vote, it wouldn't.
No, the motion
That's
fails. You have to get, tonight we need 4 votes out of 6.
We do not have a majority vote. Majority did not.
Oh, I think it's the other way around.
A tie vote, the motion fails. You have to have a majority.
So we're going to add the motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Yes.
Who's that motion by?
That was my note.
Oh, that was originally by Ms. Bosom and seconded by Mr. Ramirez.
Fall asleep.
Everyone you should have your voting box up.
I'm still voting no.
Yes.
There it is.
All right, so the motion passes 4-6 or 4-2,
4-6.
4-2,
New math.
new math. All right. Ms. Brown, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, as a new employee, we certainly waited a long time.
I know. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And to the republic
One nation
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move to executive session. Do we need a motion to move to executive session?
I'll make a motion to move to executive session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Moved and seconded, Ms. Bus, and any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. At this time, we would move to executive session, please, and we need to vote. Can we? Is it gonna pop up?
Sorry. My bad.
It's all right. I'm just waiting.
Yeah, the officers, we can have it out here.
Yeah.
And you never want to get,
Why do we have to vote on it?
it's the
The
law.
law says that's the bad part. You never ask people how they make laws or make sauce.
Yeah.
People shouldn't know.
I think the sausage is made better.
It is.
All right, do we have the results?
No. Okay. Motion carries.
All right. We will move to it. The board will move to executive session. We will have, of course, our attorney join us, and then Dr. Spurgeon will come out and have you join us in a little bit.
Try.
Careful of the, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hot.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, we never wheelchair.
Yeah, and that's what it's.
So they really don't worry about because they have a lot to do. But they love to come, so it's pretty crazy. Sleep, but, you know, so my sister went yesterday and she was much more worried. Yeah. Yeah, she was much more worried, you know, into it all, but still had a lot to say. It's kind of a thinker, you know, and that's okay, you know. So I didn't know what I was gonna walk into, and what I walked into was the mom that I know, one that getting steps, and she had a table, and then we made like four, my niece, my aunt, some friends of hers, she would actually talk on the phone, she had that. So it's a good day, and from that, so I yeah, so when he came in, it's just in the hall in the nice family, Christmas tree and everything. It sounded like she's like, going to the table, breakfast. So. Hold on, let me get it,
But still that same flavor. Oh, just never check the sugar, okay.
But I know that internally he's having some issues, so, you know, I was really happy to have this really good day. 92 and a half. No, and usually her hair is done like, you know, I mean, so she just got her hair washed, so you know, I have a friend, he does her hair, it stayed for like 3 weeks. So, it's supposed to come out, like, you know. And then, you know, I could talk with her and make her laugh a little bit. I have not seen her have a good day. So I really warmed my heart. Is it tonight? You know, on the other side, she's in the hospital, but I have to take what I can get. She has like, she has an internal and works no way. But does side.
Yeah.
In hospice. I don't put a message in, like, I guess. Then I only do that January 1st. I don't have people yet. Yeah. So we just don't know. have a sister and I have a brother who passed. And watched them. So, and then my dad passed 2 years ago, but they're very 70s. You know, my dad was 91. I am so blessed. Yeah, I am so blessed. I have had them that I have had about them. My dad passed, she stayed in the house.
Dr. Pingarelli was in a good spot and I accidentally checked him. All right. And moving on.
It's just you and I.
Yeah. We're good. All right. We're going to reconvene our regular meeting. I don't need a motion for that, right?
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna move down to F1, Superintendent, Public Current Events. Yes, sir. Dr. Spurgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Straka. We had some presentations since the last time we met. Very proud that Mr. Straka, Mr. Williams and I presented at the National ACTE Visions Conference here in Phoenix. Well attended there. It's always good to have board members participate in those. It's not only a learning session for those that are attending, but it's also a learning session for board members to kind of get a sense of kind of what we do out there and a sense of the questions that people are asking and what's the latest and greatest that's happening. The next three items that I'm going to talk about is when we had our mayor's breakfast for the first time, maybe ever. There were 5 in attendance, and one of the things that they mentioned was that, you know, a lot of folks know West-MEC, they just really don't know West-MEC. And so there are a number of community members out there that don't have children in schools. And so I agreed to go out and any place they needed me to go out and talk about West-MEC. And so the next 3 items were just that. I participated and gave an update overview at the Wickenburg Growth Summit, which was fantastic, put on by the Chamber of Commerce at it's called something Ranch. It's the new subdivision up there. Ranch, not Arrowhead. Wickenburg Ranch. What a phenomenal place that facility is. Wow.
I'm having trouble selling those.
Construction around there to get to it.
It's a pretty place. It's really nice. The next was I did an update overview for the Surprise City Council at one of their work sessions with their mayor and council members, which went really well. Some good questions. And then I just finished up yesterday with the West Valley mayors and managers. It's the group of all the West County mayors and some of their leadership team, which was fantastic yesterday. And then coming up here this spring, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Williams and I are also presenting at the National School Board Association. And that title of that was going to be the Hidden Gem in School Achievement, Career and Technical Education. So we think that's a great value add for K-12 comprehensive systems and the value we bring for career and technical education. So at the national conference, we were the tour site of choice. And so we had folks from Rogers, Arkansas, Cherry Creek, Colorado, Great Oaks, Ohio, Butler Tech out of Ohio, DLR, Fairbanks, Alaska, and we had probably around 10 tour groups, and all 4 of our campuses were toured by one group or another. And so they walked out of there, I think, very impressed with the work that we're doing. In fact, they walked out of there with some great ideas about how they're going to move their systems to the next level. So I want to say congratulations and thank you to everyone who participated in that, because that was quite a feat. Our second group for Visions was almost between 80 and 100 folks all at one time, with several different groups going throughout the Southwest campus, which was fantastic. One of the newest things, which I'm really excited about, his name is Peter Basinski, and he's from Poland, and he's the president of Immersions Lab. And they do a lot of work in artificial intelligence, AI and VR. And so they're a part of our AEC committee. And so I committed to him to give him a tour of our Northwest campus. And what's really interesting about Peter was, he said, I wish I would have seen this campus about 3 or 4 weeks ago, because I just wrote an article about how CTEs need to move in the direction that I just saw on your campus today. And I wish I'd have known that. I wouldn't have written the article, because I said, I wish these facilities existed. And now I've been on a campus that it actually does exist already. And so at some point in time, there's no way around not getting into AI and VR. So I'm trying to find the best jumping off space to where that might be most appropriate and most applicable. 2 things that we took a look at, which I was really impressed with, is we have a number of our programs, in fact, if not all of them, have a customer service aspect in the program itself about how to address whether they're kind or whether they're on the opposite end of maybe they're upset about something. And so there's AI technology that you can actually design, where you can make the avatar as kind or as not as kind as you want it to be. You can set protocols in the AI and teach students customer service and how they respond to. There's a full list of a rubric. It will grade you and show you how well you responded to that avatar in that situation, which I thought was fantastic for some of our programs. And then one of the greatest conversations I heard was between Brady Mitchell, our automotive teacher at Northwest campus, and Peter, is how much time they spend on researching the actual fixes they're going to perform on a car. He said, Scott, we spend more time researching the issue and the how-tos and the parts than we do actually fixing the car. And so with AI technology, that could be instantaneously done, which means more time, less time, and more money and more cars fixed. And so we're looking, he's gonna bring some demos back, take a look and see how we might be able to find some maybe small jumping off place to see how that might fit into, there's some VR technology where you can be changing tires in virtual reality. You could practice that 20 or 25 times, go right in and actually go to change your tires, in reality. And so there's some downtime in education where there's lost instructional time where I think maybe VR and some of the AI technology may be able to help in that space. So that's just letting you know that we're having those conversations, that there might be an appropriate place for us to start off that. We also had the West-MEC advisory Topgolf fundraiser event, very well attended. I think everybody had a great time. It was a fun time to Topgolf, and I wish I could have hit more balls. We might have come in first place, but I got pulled away by too many people talking. We had our second AEC meeting, and for the first time, we met at the Northwest campus with our satellite principals. We've invited all of our 49 satellites to one of the 4 quadrants to have an West-MEC update and overview, and then provide feedback about our programs, our services, our processes, our procedures to see what we can do better to be a better community partner. Jared also talked about how a value add we are as a CTE to their A3F accountability system and where those 20 points come from. And if not all schools are achieving those 20 points, what can we do as a system to be able to help them maximize those 20 points to possibly move them to a different level? So just a great conversation. We got 3 more of them coming up at Central Campus, Northeast Campus, and Southwest Campus before Christmas. So that's going to be a great conversation. Great feedback, and I heard some really good comments from the 5. There were 5 that showed up the first time, and so you always anticipate maybe there'll be less the first time, but I think it was positive enough that next time when they hear that we're listening and we want to be a partner in this, I think it'll be a good for second round. And the last thing I'll mention is, anytime you do something for the first time, you always want to get together and evaluate the effectiveness of it. So we met with Phoenix Raceway, their 2 individuals, and got some real positive feedback about our work-based learning experience with all of our students. There were a few things that we're going to make some corrections on coming up in March with the Menard series, but the overall opinion is our kids were fantastic. And the operations folks and the cafe folks and all the experience they had, I mean, they couldn't have done what they did without the students. So we're looking at maybe bringing them a little early in next time for some operational pieces, and then looking to maybe get specific about who's going in, how many are going in, maybe extending some of the time in some of the areas of work-based learning. But overall, just a fantastic experience for our students. In fact, I think we had a parent or 2 that tried to sneak in to become part of that experience, but we know we can't do that. So with that being said, we just have a lot going on. We have a lot on the agenda coming up this next semester, and we're going to be sharing some data with you. Mr. Williams, are you going to share some transportation data when you give your update? Okay, then I'll hold off on that. So with that being said, we're just really busy right now. We want to wish everybody a happy holiday and a very safe break.
Any updates from the board?
Well, let's see, I had gone to that CTE conference, ACTE conference in Utah. It was in September, and I had witnessed a program is called Visible Body, and I was really impressed with it. So I was telling Holly Medina about it. And then she started telling me about our Neuromage table, and so invited me to go and look at it and tour it. And so I met with Mike Johnson, and then the teacher, he's a physical therapy instructor, Jamal. I'm going to crucify his name, Beakry. And so I sat in with 2 classes with the students and stuff like that. And it just blew Visible Body right out of the water. It had like 6 different cadavers where it layered them. You could go anywhere in the body and, and do whatever you do. You can do testing and group things on there. It was really amazing. And Jamal told me more about my knee than my doctor did. I really appreciated that. And then let's see here, on the November 15th, I had talked to Shauna Bullock about, who is a senator for LD2. And she came to our Worship and Word community service thing over at Worship and Word Church. And so I was talking to her about grants, and she introduced me to Lisa Nobles of, was it A for Arizona. And they are the people that we got our transportation grant from. So upon that, I invited CJ and we had a Zoom meeting with Lisa and got to know a little bit more about, you know, our grants and stuff like that. And, you know, my thing is more for our Title I schools, you know, what can we do? So I wanted to know what the sustainability of it was and, you know, duration and all that kind of stuff. So she answered a lot of my questions that I had. So I thought it was a really good meeting.
Anybody else?
So I attended the TQI at the Southwest campus. That was really cool. Got to talk to the students, kind of figure out what's between their ears a little bit of what they're getting out of it, out of the school. Made some real, you know, on the spot suggestions about, especially the leaders of their programs. Just they got these student leaders, they're CTE officers, I believe. And they were all in a little group. They were talking about what they're pulling out of the course. And my question is, if you're going to be a leader in an industry, it's a little bit different than being on the ground level. And maybe some of that exposure to that leadership role of doing something more than just learning to turn the wrenches, but learning how to run the show. If you're going to run a shift, that's a lot different than the person showing up to go to work with a toolbox. So just little things like that as something that they can gravitate to. The kids were like, yeah, it's great. We can do something like that. So that was interesting. I did attend the CTE Vision with Dr. Spurgeon with the West-MEC team actually supporting. I was there to hear more about what's going on with different states with the CTE stuff. So I think the cool thing about that place was it had tons of innovative curriculum that was just basically everywhere. And they were doing some amazing 3D printers. They had the robotics, they had the 3D rooms, they had the VR, they had AI. I mean, you name it, they had it. It was just amazing. I could have been there all day if they would have let me, but it was really good. So I really appreciate that as well.
And I would just echo Dr. Spurgeon. It was a pleasure to, they really carried me, CJ and Dr. Spurgeon. We had about 100 people, just under 100 people in the room, I think. But it was really good. Asked some really good questions. We had a lot of support from the West-MEC team as well. So appreciate that. And thanks for the opportunity to do the dog and pony show. Good. All right, moving along. Call to the public. Ms. Brown, I don't have any cards. One last time, anyone wanting to call from the public, this is your opportunity to address the board. All right. I will move on to section H, recognitions and celebrations.
Thank you, Mr. Straka. We have 4 celebrations this evening. The first one is the automotive program at the Northwest campus scored a 4.0 or higher. 5 is the highest mark in all 10 standards and received a perfect score in most of the requirements. This is the highest grade that the ASE evaluator has given to a high school in his 25 plus years. This also highlighted the students and staff's work ethic, professionalism, organization, and knowledge. All auto students to date have all passed their ASE certification this year so far. Congratulations to Mr. Brady Mitchell, automotive technician instructor at the Northwest campus. In fact, the other comment that I heard was that the gentleman who did the evaluation wished that all programs were modeled after West-MEC's program. So congratulations to Brady Mitchell and his students and the staff at Northwest campus for an outstanding ASE certification. So congratulations.
Is Brady here? Is Brady here?
No.
No.
The second thing, Northwest Campus Adult Education Program received its COE accreditation after the recent visit to the program in November. And again, they have to have that certification to be able to offer adult education programs. And so they went through their process, got their certification. So now they can offer the 2 programs that we were working in collaboration with. It's with City of Surprise, number 1 being dental assisting, and the second one coming up will be IT security. And so congratulations on a job well done to Northwest Campus administration and faculty and staff. Also from Northwest Campus, Christina Guy, counselor of the Northwest Campus, received the 2023 ACTE National Counseling and Career Development Award. Ms. Guy was given the award at the 2023 ACT Visions Conference that was held in Phoenix, November 9th through December 1st, 2023. National Counseling and Career Development Award of the Year. Ms. Christina Guy. Christina, I know you're here somewhere. Oh, did you? Well, she was here earlier, but anyway, congratulations. So she's the National Counselor of the Year for ACTE, CTE programs, which is fantastic. Congratulations to her. And if she was ever, she would tell you that it's not just her, it's a team of work ethic that really gets things done, because our counselors on our central campuses and our counselors at our satellite campuses are just, they are the cornerstone, the backbone of the work that we get done. We couldn't do it without them. So congratulations to Christina Guy. And then number 4 is Spranta Cleese, Post-Secondary Relationships Manager, received the ACT PACE, the Post-Secondary Adult Career Education Division Award, Innovation Award for 2023 at the ACT Business Conference that was held in Phoenix, November 29th to December 1st. So congratulations to Spranta Cleese for receiving her award in 2023. So with that being said, those are my 4 recognitions. Congratulations to each one.
All right, thank you, and congratulations from the board as well. Moving on, legislative and business partner update. Mr. Williams, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Straka, members of the board, Superintendent Spurgeon, for the opportunity to provide a quick update on items pertaining to business development efforts and legislative affairs. On the business development side, there is many things happening, some of which Dr. Spurgeon included in his update. But one that I'm particularly excited about is the announcement of Amcor Technology coming right here in our backyard to the city of Peoria. I have, I don't know if I should even say this at a public meeting, but have over the years been critical of my home city of Peoria for not jumping on all the growth that's happening in the West Valley. And I hear a lot about Glendale and Buckeye and the surrounding cities. So I was very happy to hear that Peoria landed a $2 billion investment by Amcor Technologies, and even more excited to be able to work with their leadership. We're meeting with them next week to talk about workforce strategy. This $2 billion investment comes with about 2,000 jobs here in the West Valley, and again, right in our backyard, and aligns with existing programming. To my knowledge, they've not disclosed the actual site, but other than that, it is in the city of Peoria. Mr. Garcia may know otherwise. As Vice Chair Straka mentioned, we actually had the opportunity to attend the ASBA ASA conference last week as well, which provided some good learning and network opportunities. Particularly, we attended a couple sessions together on, one was procurement. Oh, Mr. Straka, now I'm going to blank on the second one that we attended together. But the other in the afternoon was an interesting session on the landscape of open primaries and general and ranked choice voting. And I just thought the conversation was interesting and what approach different organizations are taking with that. So I think that will be something to keep an ear to this next session on both sides of that conversation. Some looking to really protect the current primary model, and others that are looking to maybe change that. Also announced earlier in that same week was the resignation of the executive director of ASBA. So that opens the door for their leadership to engage in a search for a new executive director. Glendale Chamber also within the last month since we met last announced the departure of their president and CEO, who Glendale Chamber we work very closely with. They're a very active, very large chamber in the West Valley. So he is moving on to Sacramento Metro Chamber, and that opens the door for their board to engage in a permanent search replacement for the Glendale Chamber. I do, before I transition to legislative items, I want to touch on the transportation grant. Again, thank you, Board Member Bosom, for engaging with me and the A for Arizona team and learning more about that. I certainly learned through that conversation as well. We just had the opportunity last week to submit our first progress report as part of the 2-year grant cycle. And we were able to include many success stories from students and families that really express their gratitude for the resource and the ability to get to West-MEC Central programs. We have nearly 200 students served by one of the 4 connections that are articulated within that grant. Again, those are cost share agreements with member districts, the Valley Metro bus system, microtransit options within municipalities in the region, and then the rideshare option in partnership with Hop Skip Drive. The grant has certainly provided a lot of learning opportunities for us. We've never facilitated transportation before as a system. So we're learning new procedures that we need to put in place, new communications that we need to make sure families have. And as Board Member Bosom mentioned before, really thinking about how to best allocate those resources so that those that need it most get it. For some families, it's strictly logistics. Both parents work. The student hasn't turned 16 yet, so they don't have a license to drive themselves. It may not be financial need. It may truly just be logistics, and their situation can change at semester. Others, there is maybe a financial burden associated with being able to provide their own transportation. So we're embedding a lot of those questions in the application process, not to serve as a score factor on any rubric, but just so that we can prepare for the need that comes as we look at next year. And we also are going to be giving a survey to the current users of it because we want to learn what are your plans. We also need to understand what those success indicators are for those students as they near the end of their program. If they're still relying on our transportation, what is their plan once that ends and they complete West-MEC? How are they going to get to whatever next step? What if it's a community college, if it's work, if it's some other option after completing their program. So we'll glean more information through that. One thing I want to tell, well, two things. One is when we attended the West Valley Mayors and Managers meeting earlier this week, Valley Metro was there along with MAG. So I took the opportunity to, Dr. Spurgeon and I talked about this grant and want to put it top of mind for them as they look at Prop 400 and the allocation of those resources, and Valley Metro as they look for expansion to the West Valley to serve the communities in the West Valley, to really think about schools as a drop points and pickup points within that region, and think about how we can regionalize some of these transportation solutions. So we're really making the best use of those taxpayer resources. Each semester and throughout the year, we gather retention data, and there's a lot that goes into the high retention rate that we enjoy at West-MEC. Right student, right program, right reason, the culture that's created on the campus, the opportunities, the high level of engagement. We've enjoyed a 95–96% retention rate for a long time, which is phenomenal. This semester, it is 99%, which is almost statistically impossible, but it is real. And I do think in part, again, it's leaning in and students and the experiences that are being created on those campuses with the instructors and the campus leaders. But again, for these nearly 200 students, they're not struggling with the daily conversation of how are they going to get to their West-MEC program. They're not dealing with the weekly logistics of how are they going to get back and forth. So we've removed that barrier for these students, and the students that are using one of these 4 connections, 100% of them are still in their West-MEC program. So a lot of success there, but still a lot that we've learned. We have used considerably more of the rideshare portion of our budget. We're certainly within our $1.9 million award. But we've used less in the cost share line items and more in the rideshare line items. So we want to be mindful of that going forward and really lean into some of those cost share agreements and those micro transit options that we're going to explore further in the West Valley region. Legislatively, looking at the upcoming legislative session before we meet again, I believe, the 56th legislature second regular session will have convened. As I have shared before, I don't think it's possible to fully predict what's to come. So I'll make some predictions. And as we look at some of the things that will impact and influence the upcoming session, I think you'll certainly see spending and the JLBC's forecast of a $400 million shortfall. We will see in January what the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting forecasts. Historically, that's more optimistic, regardless of which party is in the executive office. But that will obviously drive the executive budget that is shared in January by the governor. There's not an agreed upon calculation to determine or forecast these budget shortfalls. It's more of a negotiated dollar amount that drives some of the negotiating and bargaining of bills. But I think it will be a part of the conversations as bills are discussed at the Capitol. We're going into a very highly competitive election year. 2024 will probably prove unlike what we've seen before. This is a very competitive market. We have the presidential race, you've got a Senate race, you've got congressional races, you've got local races. So all of those things have the potential to influence how people legislate. And they'll want to bring back bills that kind of prove their worth to their constituents and put a feather in their cap. So endorsements will matter, and those things will come into play as well. So it should be interesting to see how those things impact some of the conversations at the Capitol. We know that Congressional District 8, Representative Bentoma, Speaker Bentoma, has entered that race along with Abe Amadei, Blake Master, Senator Anthony Kern. So that could come into play with the speakership. He's indicated that he doesn't intend to resign that position to run for the office. He can manage both. So I certainly take him at his intention for that. The pre-filing period has begun. I looked earlier today. I think there was 60-something bills pre-filed. Most of them are around housing and water and air quality. As we look at the upcoming session, I do think there will be some conversation around Title 15, as I mentioned last month, and K-12. And I know Senator Bennett is looking to really, he's convened a stakeholder group around that and is really looking to explore Title 15 and how we can remove some barriers and gain some efficiencies. So with that, again, there's no predicting the legislative session, but look forward to keeping the board apprised of any developments, especially as those pertain to workforce and K-12 and CTE. I would stand for any questions.
On the Title 15, I heard of another senator who was interested in looking at that. And every place I go, I scream that we need to look at it. So do you think it's really going to happen? It's huge.
Yeah, Board Member Wiley, I think that I don't know what it would be for this session. Do I think that there could be some gain in kind of cleaning up Title 15? It's a huge task. I would be overly optimistic to say that we would see a lot of that this session, but I think it's good that the conversation's happening.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. We can't jump to the next time. We can't move on without.
Campus program updates. I'm gonna speak for Frank. I don't have the gavel, but here you go.
Good evening, board members. Dr. Spurgeon, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I don't know if I'm controlling this or. There we go. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to present an update on our campuses. I'm going to take a few minutes first to kind of share with you some updates on our campus usage and give you some information about some upcoming opportunities to even further utilize our campuses and some work we're doing there. And then I'm going to hopefully pretty quickly turn it over to our campus administrators for them to give you an update on some of their goal progress and things that are how things are going in the first semester. Lots and lots to celebrate and great success happening there. So just as a reminder really quick from last year, over the last 2 years, we've done made a lot of efforts and intentional work around looking at every one of our campuses and how can we best utilize those spaces and add additional program opportunities. So this is some information that you saw back in May. We expanded quite a few different opportunities with additional program times, creating more opportunities, which freed up more opportunities to expand adult programming in the afternoons, and added some additional programming. And we saw the results of that. So again, this was in May of last year. We saw immediate results in both our application numbers and enrollment as a result of some of those changes that we made last year. So we saw some great success with some of those things last year, and we're continuing that. Those students, those enrollment numbers that you saw back in May are those students that are sitting in our programs now, and 99% of them, as you heard earlier, are still in the seat and in our programs and being very successful on those campuses. So as we look at, you guys have copies attached to the item of the master schedules, although I'm not gonna go into detail in all of those tonight. I do have some summaries that we'll go through to kind of visually kind of capture a summary. I know those documents are a little cumbersome and all the but you have some of those details. But just before we jump into some of the visuals on our campus usage, wanted to just highlight some of the challenges and balance that we have to go through as we're designing our campus master schedules and what their program times look like and what opportunities we can offer for students. So as you guys know, one of those big balances that we have to play is with our member district schedules, and balancing those schedules and making sure that students can get to us and get back to their home school, or get to us in a timely manner and time to get back to their home school. So balancing those member district schedules, because of the funding importance of that for both our member districts and us to be able to have students on campus for a certain amount of time is a major parameter that we have to balance when we're building our schedules. That travel distance is a part of it as well. When we offer those times so students can get back and forth. So not just our time when they're with us, but so that they can get back and forth, knowing that some of our students are coming from longer distances. Parking is something we have to consider as well, depending on the time of day on a campus, how many students we can have at certain times, and balancing some of that parking. And then teacher recruitment and retention is always something we have to look at, meaning that, when we're determining even if there's a need of a program or an opportunity of a time on a campus to do it, we really have to, weigh that, how many students can we get in that program? Is there a current staff member that could pick up another section? Or do we need to invest in a new teacher to do that and balance that cost with the amount of students we can have in a program? So all of those are just factors that we have to consider, and the reason that our campuses don't look like a traditional high school campus. And so as you look at our master schedules, the other thing to highlight is some of the time, and on those master schedules, you see when students are in a seat on a campus in those programs. But that time where we do have, because of those balances we have to play, there are some times where we have some chunks of time where there's less students on our campuses. But that time is still valuable time that's not wasted. We have just some of that non-instructional time, I'll call it here, that you see where there's some of those dips where there's less students. That is time that is really being utilized for our teachers and staff to do all the program management duties that they have outside of just teaching a program. Our teachers have, we call them teachers, that's their primary role is teaching, but they're really managing a program on top of that and running a career and technical student organization and managing an advisory council, creating work-based learning opportunities for students. All of that takes time outside of classroom time for them to do that work effectively. And so we use that time for also planning and preparation, lab organization, collaboration with their colleagues, and in times for staff meetings. And then the community is also using our campuses during some of those downtimes as well, and or industry. So when we do have those chunks of time on campus, just know that we still try to maximize opportunities where we can bring students, but that time is very valuable and used very well for us to continue to produce the kind of results that we have. It takes it takes that planning, preparation, and time to do it right. So these graphics, so each one of our campuses, again, we tried to find a way to kind of show our very complicated master schedules and more of a simplified format and graphic where you can see the bottom there is the times a day, and then on the left side is the number of students that we have on campus. So you can kind of see throughout the day where we have those spikes where we have more students on campus, and there's also those times where, again, we have a little bit less students on campus or a few students on campus, but that planning preparation, that other time is being utilized. You see that the orange is the high school students, the yellowish or yellowish orange color is our adult program. So when we have adults on campus, and so you can really see, just as an example, Central Campus is our smallest campus that's up here now. You know, we're utilizing that campus from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 10:30, 11 p.m. Throughout the day. And yes, there are times where there's less students on campus, but if you really think about the span of that day, you know, most of our campuses are, we're utilizing from between 11 and 15 hours a day. If you think about a traditional high school campus, it's utilized with students on it from about 7:30 to 2:30, about 7 hours a day, or 8 to 3 with students on campus. You know, we have students on campus in varying numbers for 11 to 15 hours a day that we're operating. So it's just spread out in those different chunks of time based on some of those parameters that we have to balance.
And that's for 5 days a week.
That's for 5 days a week. Yes.
Regular schools also have that same 15 hours because most assistant principals have to stay for all the sporting events and everything. So it's probably a very similar schedule.
Absolutely. So there are extracurricular activities happening on those campuses. I've been an athletic director and assistant principal. Yes, there are 15-hour days on a regular basis for sure with those activities after school. So as we just go through these Northeast campus, you can see that time, you see that downtime between that kind of 11 and 12:30 timeframe where there's no students on campus currently during that time frame, but really utilizing that staff preparation time. And then you see the bigger spikes. That 1 to 3:30 and 1 to 6:30 is the 1 to 3:30 is the busiest time frame on all of our campuses. And then all the way until 6:30, and then again, adult programming going until late in the evening. The next to our Northwest campus is one of our biggest campuses. As you know, you see again that morning time frame. This has been a change due to some of the adjustments we've made over the last couple of years. You see that morning time frame of both our Northwest campus and our Southwest campus is really almost starting to catch up to our afternoon programs and really balancing out for opportunities for students. 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, it would not look like that. There wasn't as much of that balance with morning programs, but it's really created opportunities for different groups of students to come onto our campus in the morning that may not have, because of the extracurricular activities or others, may never have even applied to one of our programs.
Mr. Trucca, one of the things that we really focused on last year was we were leaving out a whole group of students that were participating in sports and extracurricular activities for where the programs were offered. And that was why we moved some of the programs to the 7 a.m. area so that students can actually do both, because there were students who were, I'd love to take XYZ program, but I can't because I'm in football or basketball or soccer or whatever. So it's turned out to be extremely well.
Yeah, you see this.
Many that were in sports have come to that 7 a.m.
I don't know that we could
Did you know
determine
that? I mean, don't dig it up, but I'd be
Yeah.
curious if we had that number, because that'd be really useful.
Yeah, I know anecdotally, I know it's a large percentage of those students that are now taking advantage of those morning programs are those athletes in some of those, especially in certain programs like a physical therapy is a great example. In a morning session of that, you get a lot of athletes that come to a program like that now in the morning that may not have been able to before. This is our Southwest campus, our largest campus currently as far as number of students. Also, you see some of the uniqueness about Southwest campus. In addition to high school students, the adults, we also have 2 community colleges operating on that campus as well. So you see some of that blue-ish purple, whatever color that is the Estrella Mountain Community College programs. That are also running in the evenings as well on Southwest Campus. So just a lot happening on that campus throughout the day and evening. And so even though we've done a lot, we've made some great changes. We're not done yet. We're still looking at where can we continue to find in those gaps or pockets of students that may be able to come at different times of day. What could we do differently and offer some additional programming? A couple examples for next school year, we are going to add 2 programs. One being Amazon Web Services or a cloud networking program that we're going to offer on our Southwest campus. This will be our first try at offering in a program. It's going to be in the middle of the day, kind of from that like 10:30 to noon timeframe. To kind of see how that works and how those students that maybe are those homeschool students or those other students that aren't as constricted with their schedule, what that might look like. And so we're trying that at our Southwest campus. We have a current teacher that's willing to take that on for us. So that'll really help us to see if this is a model that we can really explore in other opportunities down the road as well.
You know, one of the things that we're gonna focus in on is you have the homeschool, private school, online schools and charter schools, and they have a much more flexible schedule. And for them having to be back at their home high school for 4 hours, so we're gonna target specific audiences to see if we can't fill some of the gaps between some of those open time periods. And we think we're gonna be pretty successful, at least we hope we will.
But and that's where the market is moving. I mean, I don't know if you all heard, but Paradise Valley just announced they're gonna close 4 schools.
Yeah.
And so public school and that traditional 6-hour day, we need to get ahead of it. So that's I would think that's the right way to go.
That goes well, absolutely. We're also adding an automation robotics program, which will be a new 1-year program for us. And these haven't officially been announced to our member districts yet, so they're hot off the press, and we're going to be getting the word out fast and furious in January for those programs. But we didn't want to wait. We wanted to start these this next fall. It also not on here, but we're also at our Northwest campus, we're going to add a cosmetology extension course that will go run throughout the summer and into the fall of the next school year with one of our current teaching staff to be able to take our students that finish our hairstyling program. And if they want to pick up those extra 600 hours to get their full cosmetology license, we'll have a kind of a bridge extension course for them to be able to do that. So that's another opportunity that we're just in development, are going to make that happen this summer. So we're also, as you guys know, we're creating some expansion at Northeast Campus and our Southwest Campus, which will give us more opportunities to think of new ideas and innovative programs that we can grow and expand more sections of those programs potentially and or add some new programming. So this work will continue. We'll continue to keep a close eye on any and all opportunities as we look at our enrollment numbers, as those application enrollment numbers come in this spring. We use a lot of that data to be able to really see, okay, where do we have pockets of students that are not being served or we're having to turn students away, and where can we then create some more opportunities? So we'll continue to look at all of that data and generate those ideas.
Automation robotics program, are we gonna have that at all campuses, or are there certain campuses we're thinking about, or?
Yes, so currently, Southwest campuses will start it in the fall, but the answer is yes. We are looking at that similar type of programming at both our Northeast campus as we create more space, some of the space that we're gonna really build and do some of that advanced manufacturing with some of the automation robotics, semiconductor manufacturing. So similar programming at Northeast. And it is part of our initial design conversations at the Southeast campus as well. Because this will really serve that advanced manufacturing need out there in semiconductor. I can almost guarantee the meeting on Monday, the new company is going to ask for similar skill sets that this type of program can serve. So yes, starting at Southwest, but we envision that'll be in multiple campuses.
So one thing I would also focus on is as you're growing and we're adding more students, more programs, have we started to survey the teachers, the instructors to make sure they're comfortable with the growth, to include instructor training to make sure that they're up to date on the greatest techniques of training, particularly not just the day courses, but the evening courses, so that they're also attuned. Because the focus isn't just on the programs, isn't just on the students. the other part of that ecosystem is the teachers. And I think that they have we gotta pay attention to them as well, to make sure that they're being kept up as well.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's a great suggestion and we try to really get that teacher feedback, but also balance how fast we're growing with how much we can put on to our teachers as well is something we have to be very considerate of to retain those teachers, right? We have some really superstars that we want to get as much as we can out of them and maximize the amount of students we can put in front of them, but also not burn that teacher out to the point where they decide to pursue a different opportunity. Transitioning, talked for longer than I wanted to, but I would like to get to our campus administrators who are the star of the show. So I'm going to start with representing our central campus is our assistant campus administrator, Tremaine Marshall, and our campuses are going to talk through how they are really at a campus level, really achieving these common teaching and learning goals that we've all been focused on. But what that looks like on each one of our campuses and some progress so far this year. So, Mr. Marshall.
Good evening. I'm always happy to talk about the great things that are happening at our central campus. And so I want to just quickly give you a rundown of how we're helping achieve our strategic goals for the year. So real quick, talking about career literacy, our school counselor and our career coach do a great job of making sure our students are aware of the opportunities that are available to them as they complete their program, talking about different program pathways. The discovery meetings are held with as many of our first year students as possible, along with their families and parents when we can get them. Sometimes they meet with them individually in person. Sometimes the parents hop on a virtual phone call or a virtual meeting to meet with the counselors. But we talk about the career trees, we talk about their experiences in the program, but most importantly, we talk about where they can go after they complete the program. So we do that throughout the year. And again, we try to capture as many students as possible. In addition to that, we've increased work-based learning experiences this year. You've mentioned, or we've talked about NASCAR already, but I want to highlight our aviation program. We've got 2 new instructors this year, and they've used their connections to get our students some experiences at Textron Aviation as well as Qatar Aviation. So they're aware of what's happening in general aviation as opposed to commercial aviation. What we found is a lot of our students think they want to go work for a commercial airline until they realize what that means, leaving home and things like that. And they're just not quite ready when they finish our programs. And so we make sure that they know what's available to them when they finish. In terms of meeting our industry credential goals, we meet with our teachers regularly, annually to update those goals. And so every year we expect or we hope that our teachers will increase the goals a little bit higher so that they're aligned with what's expected of us from the district and the goals that we're trying to obtain. And so we see the data every year, placement data and credentialing data. Last year, we had 99% of our students obtain a credential. This year, currently, we've got 79% of our students who have obtained a credential. And I think the only holdout is probably our welding students and our coding students, and they don't really test until the spring. So we're confident that we'll be up there again about April or May. And then finally, student achievement data. We've increased the number of learning walks. And so I just want to quickly talk about what learning walks are. Essentially, the admin team, along with our C&I coaches, go through classrooms. We just do some slight observations. We look at how the students are engaged, what the teachers are doing, and that leads to some conversations. And so we look for areas where we can increase the engagement or provide some insight into areas that we think that teachers might need to focus on to get students to where they need to be. We've instituted, the district, I should say, has instituted benchmark assessments this year. So we'll be running our first round of benchmark assessments this December. Again, it's for our teachers so that they have an idea of where they are in December and where they need to be come April or May. It gives them some insight into what areas they can focus on, spend a little more time in terms of the students haven't quite grasped the ideas or the content, and where they can kind of lay off because the students have a really good understanding of what those concepts or ideas are. And then finally, the TSA results are always an emphasis for us. TSA is our state assessment, CTE state assessments for each of the programs. Last year, we had an 89% pass rate, which was up by 3%. So we're confident that we'll hit that 90% mark at the end of this year. And I'm going to pass it over to our Northeast campus, Mr. Warren. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Striker, governing board. Thank you as well. Just a health check on Northeast campus. A lot of it will be echoed, but certainly an indication of the tight alignment between district goals and superintendent goals and campus goals, and that's much appreciated by each and every campus. It gives us clear direction with some autonomy as well. So much appreciated. My wife asked me what I wanted for Christmas recently, which is a suspicious question. And without pausing to think, I said just out of habit and a sign of alignment perhaps is that 90% of central program completers exit with a purposeful career plan. And I caught myself and said I've got to, as I've been advised by many people, get a little mental health here. So I'm going to pursue perhaps making a friend or two and then perhaps a hobby to make that happen. But again, echoing what Mr. Marshall shared, at least 90% of our central campus completers will exit with a purposeful career plan. Part of that this year, we brainstormed with our career coach, Mrs. Calhoun, and Mrs. Casillas, our assistant administrator, and Ms. Hook, our guidance counselor. How can we not put that only on teachers, thank you, but also to be able to be part of that and be part of that conversation with our students. So what we did was put together on no carbon paper required, NCR. I was going to say carbon copies, but that would age me. So I'm purposely avoiding that. But we did put sit down together. We went out to the labs. Mrs. Casillas and I sat down, brought some lawn chairs, brought a cooler with some drinks, brought some snacks, and sat down and just had a conversation about what is your purposeful career plan, because we do know that May of 2024 is going to come. Will you be prepared, and will you have a plan? So part of that was, for an example, so we created this form. It gave tidbits of information to students. In this example, a veterinary anesthesiologist was the goal. Okay, so what does that mean? And the pathway was GCC and then U of A, bear down. So just what does that involve? Meet with Ms. Hook. Know when application deadlines are coming up, that application window. Pursue those scholarships and FAFSA, when is that opening? So, and make sure that your instructor knows your plan so you can get that support, and make sure your parents are on board as well. And then we advertise that with our NEC Engages, our YouTube videos, which we've continued. And then another student as well, 2 options, going to industry or going to military. And then what does that mean? Make sure we're connecting with a recruiter if you're serious about that. Not just interested, but committed. And industry, what does that mean? Meeting with our career coach as well to start presenting those opportunities and find that support. And then that data collected allowed us as well to get our guidance counselor and our career coach to be able to say, hey, this is good information for us. And then it allows us to visit with students who perhaps through their behaviors are swaying from their purposeful career plan, and we can bring them back in saying, hey, my brother, you're saying you want to do this, but your behavior is that way. Let's get you aligned. So industry credentials, 88% of our completers. Again, September of 2023, we sat down like all our campuses and had those conversations with our teachers. Let's set those goals. Last year, as a baseline, 12 out of 13 of our instructors did meet their student credential goal. Currently, we have 5 out of 11 programs that have met that credential goal, and we're at 53% of our students haven't earned a high-value industry-ready credential. So at midpoint, we would assess we're in a healthy place. And then the programs have nuances. Again, like Mr. Marshall had said, we've got vet science who will take their credential, their NAFTA at the end of the school year. Pharmacy is a unique situation as well. Student achievement, 90% passing on ADE TSA. We did meet that last year, 75% on the district post. Part of that is talking about the instructional focus on chunking that content, that dichotomy of the master brain teaching the novice and beginning brain, and the master brain making all these connections that perhaps the novice brain doesn't have, and want to take them to critical thinking and problem solving. But I have to know, I need to know the fundamentals and the basics there. And then talking about feedback and chunking as well. You know, I thought I knew chunking 3 years ago, and I've revisited it 9 or 10 times and still it's a process. So changing thinking of our instructors and getting them to think that way. And then feedback, what is feedback? We all crave that feedback. It's information toward the goal, which helped us. We went to a Principal Leadership Academy and it allowed me, thank you, Mr. Guy, that allowed me to revisit what that is. There's advice and there's a place for that, and that's awesome. And there's evaluation, there's a place for that. It's awesome. What about feedback towards that goal, and that goal being at all times all about student learning? So we're also pushing campus touch points so we can get parents on our campus to engage with their students and what they're learning, not just the facility. We do a good job of that, but also getting them to engage. Today we had open clinic in our MA lab, so parents and grandparents and friends were coming in and going through intake and injections and getting blood draws and all that, and really replicating what that experience is. And our professionalism rubric as well. We're continue to go forward, the West-MEC professional rubric, but also last year as a campus, what does that mean on the Northeast campus? You know, what does it practically mean? How can we evaluate it? So we brainstormed and shared ideas and brought it down to a level that that means something to staff and students at Northeast campus. So thank you very much. I will now gift you with an upgrade in presenters and to Ms. Medina. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Swarnick. Vice Chair Straka, members of the board. So on our line campus goals, kind of about our process is a little bit different. We do a lot of the same things at a lot of our different campuses. I wanted to present to you kind of what our leadership team puts together. Before the school year starts, we have leadership team that involves teachers, counselors, administration, and some other staff members that kind of look over the data, that look for alignment as to reach our goals for the end of the year. And as we were looking at some of our goals, we really were kind of looking at some of the connectivity of being able to do that connection with students as well as parents, as well as with teachers in order to reach the student achievement level, the industry credentials, as well as that career literacy. So the first one that we really kind of looked at that we found important is the math proficiency. So really taking focus on the math and giving some strategic and targeted professional development to our teachers, because when you say you have to teach math to our teachers, they're thinking calculus, you know, and it's like, no, we're not asking you to teach calculus. We want you to teach the math that is important within your content area. And we're finding there's a lot of different content areas that teach the same math. So helping each other with shared math lessons on a drive. We have a coach's corner that occurs at all of our staff meetings, that a coach comes in and teaches different math techniques or way to teach math. This is more of a simplified and industry directive type of math that we are using. So we want to increase that math proficiency on the end of the year post-assessment in May, which in turn will increase the student achievement, which in turn will also increase their industry credentials in passing that credentialing exam. Second goal is family involvement. We know that the family is the biggest part in order to be successful as our students are in school, as well as when they leave our school. So we want our families to be more involved, and that's always been our challenge for us, and we're trying to bring them in more and more. Some of the things that we want to do is bring your parent to work day. We've already have some of those active and going on. Newsletters, community events, advisory councils. They send home good news cards, a student-based enterprise that is open to the public, as well as pulling families in, especially when they're getting close to opening to the public. They're more of the model stage that they can experiment or try things on if they're willing, as well as the work-based learning. A lot of our clients that come in, you know, for oil changes or things like that are the family members. And in turn, having more of that connection with the families as well as with the students is going to increase their understanding of where their student can go and how they're going to get there. So there's your career literacy, as well as the conversations at home that are happening and how you're doing with your grades, so to increase student achievement, as well as the better understanding of what the industry credentials are available to those students. The last goal is to increase student interactions and build communications. We're finding Students want to learn about other programs to see if there's similar pathways that they can take or understand and send a message back to the students that are at their own school or talk to future West-MEC students or siblings as to the different type of programs. So we've put together student advisory. Students should always have a voice on the campus. This is where we listen to them and we can hear from them as to what is going on. Program rotations, so they get to learn about different programs on the campus, as well as community events. When we have community events, we're involving the different programs. For them to understand and even to teach what they are learning to other students on the campus increases all 3 levels. So that is our progress towards those goals and as we focus and moving forward in that alignment. So presentation. So I'm gonna pass it on to Dr. Parsons.
Thank you. Mr. Straka, board members, unfortunately, I'm gonna present a lot of the same thing. You know, being last, you get a lot of that. We were very fortunate that we were provided a guidance at the beginning of the year regarding what the superintendent's goals were, and it's very simple. We adopted the same thing that every other campus is doing and strove to make sure that within the system that we're using, we are answering the goals that make us and make the superintendent achieve their goals so that there's nobody doing cross-functional work. How we got to that approach is we took the goals that were provided and our goals that were previous at our first staff meeting of the year. We talked about it as a staff. What are we doing? What systems do we have in place? How can we measure that and make sure that it's going to continue and that we can benchmark it along the year to ensure that we're going to achieve our goals? The staff understood clearly what we were going to do. From there, we moved into leadership, our sub meeting, much like Holly Medina talked about on her campus, and said, okay, how do we track and measure that to make sure that we have a clear plan? Right now, what I can say is for our literacy 2.0, our teachers are up to date. They're where I expect them to be. When we look at the modules and lessons, they're on target. For industry credential goals, right now, amazingly, 8 of my 14 programs have already hit the benchmark. So that was kind of actually surprising data for me at one of our staff meetings that it came out and I was like, oh, that means we're already there. Cool. Student achievement, you know, that's kind of a gamble. We're measuring that with some benchmark assessments at the semester. So in January, I would have a better answer for that. I can say that, you know, much like Dave Swarnick talked about, we focused on a lot of feedback. How do you give feedback? How do you take feedback, etc. The one deviation that we have in a campus goal is we're also having a conversation about mindfulness. And the reason we're doing that is our staff, we've noticed that this generation of students seem to need resiliency training and understanding how to deal with things in life and understanding what resiliency is. The heart of resiliency comes from being able to understand who and what you are, and our staff needs to be able to have that conversation with themselves so that they can role model and project that to the student. So in an effort to increase student resiliency, we started talking as a staff about what mindfulness looks like, and that is the only deviation from complete alignment to the superintendent's goals. With that, I'm not going to rehash all the things that we're doing. That is the same as every campus. I'm going to give it back to Mr. Guy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to start on the left and we'll just work down.
So I had a couple of thoughts. So we talked a lot about, so we back up. So in my career path, I get the luxury of hearing the discussion from the company's perspective, from them speaking with higher education centers looking for government grants or explaining their shortfalls. Then I get to hear this and I get to hear all the other schools talk as well. We still hear a lot about students who come out of CTEs that quit or they can't sustain a job or they're just not there yet. Some of the things that I've heard them talk about, and this is a recent discussion with NAU and ASU, is more alignment between the student body and the companies that they're trying to work for. Now we have corporate partnerships with West-MEC. If we were to create a time, I hate to use the phrase field trips, but that's exactly what it is. The classroom is a classroom. It's like, and I would take it to Palo Verde, for instance, the nuclear power plant. If you've never been by a nuclear generator, you will never have seen the extreme of human innovation. It is a huge, ginormous piece of steel bigger than this room. And it runs 24/7 on this nuclear, for that nuclear power plant and unit. It's amazing. So if you learn to work in engineering, but you've never seen engineering, you're probably not gonna be able to link those two things up. The other part of it is the work schedules, things to expect beyond academic teaching. So you can learn how to turn a wrench, but can you turn a wrench for 12 hours a day? Can you do it under stress with multiple jobs that you have to accomplish in that day? And it has to be done correctly. And then can you do that for 6 days a week and then sometimes on a holiday? You know, you gotta kind of learn these things, because the minute they hit that blockade, they back off. And they basically say, I'm out. And so that's what we're here. So I would recommend something along that line that you guys can create. Also, that would give the student alignment with the workforce that they're gonna go to, which is very important. You know, that could be a solution, but also teachers. So educators are not as indifferent to teachers when it comes to industry. And one of the best expressions I've heard is, if you've never looked for a job, it's hard to tell how to tell someone to look for a job. If you've never been rejected on a job interview, it's hard to explain. It's just kind of part of the process. Just do more of it. If you never been told this is what you want, but this is what you're gonna get, you know, you don't know how to do these things. So that resilience of being in our American workforce system has to be taught. Because the minute they leave you guys and they're out in the world, there is no teacher to lean back on and say, well, I'm struggling. I got nowhere to live. I got to find, and this ties into things like homelessness. It's a further discussion. It's a larger discussion. But this is what we see in our student bodies, that COVID kind of killed a lot of it. We got to rebuild it quickly. We got to rebuild it according to the industry to keep people successful. And I think some of that alignment has to still take place on the educator level to include the student level. And then one of the things that NAU was talking about, their Flagstaff's trying to do a keep people in Flagstaff moment, where they're trying to keep their population there for their workforce. And they were talking about, well, how do we keep people here when they graduate from NAU? They hit a job, they don't like it now, they're no longer students, now they're residents, and they go back to Phoenix. And we just have wasted all this time, money, and effort, and they're not staying. So some of the things that they're doing is doing something like a student connection for alumni. I know high schools traditionally don't focus on alumni because they're high schools, universities do. So if there's a way to connect, to build that connectivity between students and either in the same curriculum or across campuses. I know we used to have things like pen pals back in the days where you're connected somehow to some way to somebody of the same interest. To create that again would probably be something that they could do on a connectivity level, which will bridge their ability to grow themselves as well. And you can even do it if you get connected someone from Southwest to Northeast or Central Campus, and just found a way to connect them as pen pals or kind of like mentors, and they can self-mentor each other in the same field in a different campus with a different perspective, with a different market. You might get more of that interest that'll help them make more of that alignment. So just some ideas I want to throw out there, but other than that, the teachers, the principals doing awesome jobs.
Thank you. I took a lot of notes there. It's very valuable feedback for different areas we can grow. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I thought that was really great. I like
Oh,
that.
thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Just a comment real quick. You know, Mr. Garcia, one of the things that's really gonna be beneficial, you know, the work that we're doing with the AEC and building those apprenticeships. And that's one of the things that's missing right now, that goes right to your very point about students not completing, not finishing, wanting to stop something. It's about that relationship. It's about them getting involved at a much higher level in a more real world setting. Our work-based learning is very real, but it's not 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day, day in, day out. But that apprenticeship model, I think, is going to be of great assistance. It may not correct everything, but I think it's going to give that student an opportunity to build that relationship, understand exactly what they're getting themselves into before they actually get in and say, it's not what I signed up for.
Yeah, but I think that's gonna help. I'll be great. Excited.
Well. I really don't have any questions. I want to thank you guys because I asked for you guys to do this presentation. I think it was wonderful. So thank you for updating us.
Mr. Ramirez, anything?
No, thanks.
Ms. Wiley?
I love it. I think you're doing a great job. Where else in the United States of America do they have the retention rates that we have?
I've never
CTE.
heard of any, yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
mean-
amazing ourselves right now. We like check the data like 3 times.
Yeah, I would, yeah, but I mean, I know a few, but they're definitely not where we're at, so. Y'all are doing something right.
Well, yeah, our administrator, our leaders and our teachers are doing a lot right.
Great, great, thank you.
You know, I found the information incredibly useful and interesting. When we look at the graph of building utilization, I like to think outside the box sometimes. I see those valleys or the peaks, and I try to think of what kind of program do we create that's needed that would help young people today. I don't know whether it's beekeeping, I don't have the answer, but I'd love to fill those spots. And as we look to the future, that's what the board needs to do. We can use that to, can we fill programs here before we build? And, you know, just kind of look ahead. So thank you. I found it incredibly well done.
Yep, I liked a lot of what I saw. I think one of the things a lot of industries are starting to do, which I haven't seen in the utilization, is workspace sharing. Where, you know, everybody works virtual a couple of days a week to save on real estate. You have somebody coming in Monday, Tuesday, and someone else Wednesday, Thursday, using the same desk. So I look at some of our utilization of classrooms and offices. Are we able to share some of that? Because if they're in the lab, they don't need the classroom. How can we maybe start to leverage and utilize some of our space there? That would be the next step I would ask. And then I just have a general question about credentials, and this is where I have trouble wrapping my head around. Just like the ASE, there's 8 certifications. If our student gets one, can they go into the workforce? Like if they get engine performance, is there a job that they can do? And so when we see industry, and that's where, but there are other things that for cosmetology, there's only 1 certification, so they need 1 out of 1. But how many, and so that's on this certification. I can't wrap my head around, does that mean 80% of our students could go into workforce today because they have all the certifications they need?
Yeah, so we've identified the way we're tracking, when we have those high value industry credentials and we set our goals around those, auto's a great example. So ASC, when we write a goal for our auto programs, we decide, so it's multiple. We know that one credential might help, but our teachers and programs set the goal at multiple certifications within that program. So their goal, each program and teacher even writes their goal specific to what's going to best serve their needs for their credential and their program, that we've identified as the high value credential that's been told to us by industry that high value to us means it's preferred or required, meaning that it's preferred, meaning we will hire you if you go into the industry with this credential, or required. Like here's it's a gatekeeper. You have to have this in order to go into the industry. So when we track that data, that preferred and required means, and it's been defined by industry for us to mean those students will be employed.
So what I'm hearing you say, just so I can play it back. So for auto, you need more than 1. So when we say it's completed, that means they've gotten the 2, 3, 4, however many they need to go into the automotive industry. So it's not 1, it's 4, or what is it? So I'm curious, is it, how many of the 8 do they need to get?
I think the goal, I would have to look, I think we have it written that the goal is at least 3 credentials that they get for our goal in order to meet that. But most of our students almost all of them achieve all 8 or between 5 and 8. Yeah.
And then FAA is a similar thing. Okay. And that was the only questions I had, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't went back to sleep. Probably thrown me out of the meeting again too. Oh, superintendent's mid-year goals.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Strong. I'll be pretty quick here because some goals we can't really assess yet, but goal number one, ask that we achieve the 88% high value credential, for district wide. And right now we sit at 92% as of December 2023. So we're doing a great job in matching that goal. And as the board, you hear administrators kind of say ho hum that we're kind of all aligned. Well, many districts would love to have that. And I've never been in a place where you're aligned from top to bottom and from bottom to top. We're all pulling on the same rope in the same direction. And that's what makes things easier, because the work is hard. No matter how you look at it, it's difficult. So you don't want to keep piling things on. So if we're all doing the same thing, the same work, because what we do in CTE is all we do in CTE, it makes a real difference. So even though it sounds kind of ho hum, that's a great place to be when people are working in the same direction. Goal number 2 talks about 90% of central program students will pass the Arizona Department of Education TSA. Again, those don't happen until the spring, but I know this past summer they took the previous TSA results. Teachers, administrators, instructional coaches got together, took a look at those results, did some benchmarking assessment to put those together. And I got to tell you, our benchmark assessments in the district are more complex than the actual TSA tests. So when you see those benchmark assessments starting to go up and show good progress, then you're really seeing students do extremely well. So we're very proud of the fact that we analyze the data. Here's our strong points. Here's where areas in which we have challenges. What can we do to make up the difference to ensure that the next group of kids, because keep in mind, you're always measuring different groups of children. It's not the same group going through one grade to grade 12. It's different group of kids, and everybody comes in at a different level. The one thing you have to realize about assessment is no matter where they start, we know exactly where they have to finish. So some students it's going to take a little bit more of the front, some days take a little less on the backside, if that makes sense. Goal number 3, 90% of our central program students will produce an individualized student career literacy plan. And if we can somebody change on that slide? Can you change it? So I want to give you just a little update. If you remember the last time we talked about this, too far. Oh, hang on. Let me go back here. See, now I just want to do this. I just want to push it. One more. Go back forward again. Here's one. So if you remember, Mark Perna, the person that put together this career trade, it's in all 29 of our programs. And really this was put together because as I talked to the teachers back in April of 2022, we talked about career literacy. It's not one more thing, it's the thing that we do. And it's the most important thing to do, because when you have that career pathway plan, you make better decisions, earlier decisions, more effective decisions, which leads to less time spent in doing things that you don't want to do and more time spent on the things you can focus in on career pathway. So in each one of these, as you will know, there's 3 different levels. If you leave West-MEC and you have that credential, Mr. Strachey, you can come right out and go to work in some of these areas for medical assistants. If you want to go to a 2-year technical school or a 2-year community college, this opens up brand new doors for you with that either new credentials or that 2-year degree. If you want to go on to a 4-year technical professional degree, these doors open for you as well. Every student at the beginning of the year actually has a leaf. They put their name on the leaf and they put where they actually want to end up coming out of the West-MEC program all the way to see it through the end. These little white flowers are where students have already gotten a job out in the workplace. And they come back to tell us, we took this credential, went out, and this is where we're working now. The next step in this process that we haven't talked about much that I'd like to do, it'd be nice to be able to sprinkle in some raindrops so it shows business and industry partnerships, because they're the ones who actually water and allow this tree to actually take place, because without them, there is no door to walk through, there is no jobs to be able to send them to. So my philosophy and my vision was, every parent that wants to send their child to West-MEC, they really can't see the end from the beginning. And it's best to be able to do that, because if you can see every step in the process, it makes for a better decision up front, because if not, then CTE still has that negative connotation of growing up with dirty hands all your life. And so the next step of the process is now every single program has this new poster in all the buildings. They're all there now. And you can click on that QR code now, and it will take you to our district website. And it takes you to the website and it shows you, it'll take you to all 29 of our programs and anything and everything that you want to know about West-MEC's 29 programs. That's the next step of the process. We're working with Pipeline AZ. Pipeline AZ is a career and technical education research engine that really provides students with the information and data they're going to use to complete their plan. And so this is going to be the secondary part. Pipeline AZ is going to be the main emphasis for students to do that research. And then the final analysis, this is what will happen. My goal is to have 90% of our students produce a plan, I think by the 1st of May or the end of April, what it is. But here's what it's going to look like. So the student's going to have their names. They're actually going to pick which program or career pathway that they want to go into. They're going to do some research on how many hours or credentials does it take to be able to work in that job. And then how much are they going to make, whether that's yearly or hourly, what's the range? And then the next thing is that next steps are in the process. So we have articulated agreements, Maricopa County Community College, NSU, ASU, Arizona State University. And so those will be listed here. So students will be able to say, when I leave West-MEC, if I want to go into XYZ program, these programs are already articulated with West-MEC. This is my step 2, step 3, step 4. So that's already articulated. And then at the very bottom of the screen of their plan, it's going to say, if I want to come out and go to work in this career field with these credentials, what business and industry are actually hiring within the geographic footprint for which they said that I can go to work for right now. Because we want to keep all of our students in Phoenix. I mean, just like in Flagstaff, they want to keep more students there. We want to keep our workforce here in Phoenix because, you know, it means something to be at home. It's very scary to go away for the first time. That's why many first year students, college students come back because they've never been away from their home. And so we like to keep students here and create that connection. So that's what this career path is. It look like this is the last step in the process that'll be created this spring. And then we'll have students produce their own career pathway plans. And again, it's seeing the end from the beginning. So that mom, dad, aunt, uncle, parents and guardians can give that, make that student's choice a really good choice from the very beginning. Make sense? So those are my first 3 goals. Goal number 4, Ms. Mays is going to talk about the next 2. So.
Good evening, Vice Chairman Straka, members of the governing board. I will be brief. We have a benefits committee that has been working with me to provide some input in terms of what employees would like to see in the benefit plans for next year. As you know, benefits make up 80% to 85% of our operating budget. So not only is it a very important financial analysis, but we want to keep our employees happy. Because if they're happy with their salary and they have good benefits, then obviously we'll be able to retain them. So right now we have 16 members that are on the committee. It's a good cross-section of members, including administration, teachers. We have classified staff members that are on there. We have C&I staff. And so we meet every month and we have a different topic. So our first meeting, we talked about how do benefits work? Because I wanted to make sure that they understood what is a deductible, what is a, out-of-pocket expense, how do our plans work? So we spent some time talking about that. So our next meetings, we'll be looking at various vendors to say, hey, what do you have to offer? And we kind of centered our work around 4 goals. Is it affordable? Is it sustainable? Is it comparable? And is it equitable for all of our staff? So hopefully by March, we will have a recommendation that we like to present to the governing board. Superintendent Spurgeon has asked me to do an analysis in terms of cost. What are we paying out of M&O? What are we paying out of our classroom site fund? Because I think that was a goal for the board last year. So we'll have that analysis as well. So that is an update on benefits. Any questions?
Thanks. You get the next one.
I think I have the next slide too. Okay, so you probably heard that our auditors have become our best friends in the last couple of weeks. So I'm just going to talk about our annual audit, our regular Heinfield-Meach audit that we have every year. So this year, our auditors came out for 2 visits. They did some initial auditing, and then they came out for what they call sampling, for they look for a little bit more detailed financial information. They like to pull AP statements. They look at lots of different things. So when they came out, the first time there were 5 minimal findings. Out of those 5 findings, we were able to present whatever information that we needed to do to correct it. And then when they came out in December, it was a little bit more of an involved audit, and they came out with, I think it was 9 findings. But again, they were pretty minimal, and they'll give us a chance to correct it. We also have a single audit that's coming up on January 31st, which is primarily for our grants. So that's pretty much where we are with audits. Do you have any questions? No,
And I'll come back to the board once it's complete.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I talked to the one auditor and he just kept firing questions of, where do you think there's fraud? And it's like, I don't think there's fraud. It's like, well, where do you, and it's like, you're digging into, and they ask, does the board review all the vouchers and stuff? So
We have any lawsuits against the district, that's another big one.
Yeah, we don't have any of those, so thank you.
Mr. Straka, the last thing I'll mention is for the first time, I actually included in administrative content an update on my actual evaluation tool. Because I know sometimes it's overwhelming to get all this information like in June, and you gotta review everything. So now I've updated everything in each of the 6 goal areas, so you get a chance to review that. If you have questions, comments, contact me, text me, email me, let me know, give me a call, and we can kind of walk through that. But I tried to align everything that's happened this first semester, align with each one of the 6 goals on my evaluation tool, so you get a chance to see that, because each one of those activities align with each of those category areas. So if you have questions, just let me know, but I thought it would be easier to do it now, so you get a chance, to read at least half of it, you get a chance to review the first half. Instead of getting half of it. If you get it, it's overwhelming. It's. it can be
It's
overwhelming.
nice to see things as they come and then you can keep it in your mind.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, sir.
And I think I'm done.
But I think
Okay, next up is revision of policies pursuant to ASBA recommendation. You're done.
I knew I should take a seat. Okay, good evening again, and I very quickly. There were 9 recommendations to policy changes from the ASBA. And I will just reference them and go through the highlights of each one in just a few less than 30 seconds. Governing board policy BCB, which was the board member conflict of interest. The change there was basically to change it from member districts with less than or more than 3,000 students or more, changed it to districts with fewer than 3,000 students, and raising the purchasing threshold from, I think it was $1,000 to $100,000.
Which one was that?
That would have been BCB.
BCB. Can I ask a question on that? The first blue paragraph. Explain that to me. What is it?
You mean where it says the district is allowed to employ?
Right.
Okay, so for this one, I guess in the past, if you were to hire someone who was related to a governing board member within a 2-year time span, you couldn't hire them. So this change, if the person is being hired basically to be a teacher, this kind of helps to address the teaching shortage.
Okay, an example. We needed a construction teacher. And it so happens one of the board members was interested in doing that. He ended up getting that job. Did not wait 2 years. We were able to fill that job. The kids love him. So I don't want this in here. Excuse me, that's first read.
Vice Chairman Straka, Board Member Wiley. So this last legislative session, this is a change that's a result of statute this last legislative session. And it does allow for that if it's a position in which they're working directly with students. So in that case that you gave, that would be allowed.
Right. So it's a good thing.
Just wanted to make sure.
That's good. I agree with you, Bob.
Because we need teachers that have happens to be from board member, oh well.
You're right. I love them.
So then the converse example would be, I think it was EVIT hired one of their board members as assistant superintendent. They resigned and got a sweetheart salary.
How do you do that?
So you're saying going forward, I wouldn't be able to resign for West-MEC for 200,000 a year. I'd have to wait 2 years.
We wouldn't hire you.
She could work with the students. She could be in that administrative position.
And was that EVIT example part of this?
I think so.
Only thing I can say about this is a lot of these policies, they quote our ARS statutes and they change words. And I just now really started to compare what these are and what state statute really says. And if you're going to quote state statute, I think that you need to adopt state statute, and changing a word from, shall to must means a lot, especially in a legal system. And if we're going to adopt any of these, I think we need to change the language to exactly what the state statute says.
It's ASBA, we don't need to.
Exactly.
Noted. Okay, moving on to BDA, Board Organizational Meeting. The change for the most part is that the governing board will now, if it adopts the policy, will now have more time in the month of January. Following the election to, if they have to do any organizational board changes like elections and that sort of thing. So the change just was basically to give the board more time. Okay, and then there were some language changes from president to chairman.
So one of the things we used to have in here, I think, was on an off election year, you could hold the organizational meeting in December. Because we had done that. Are we still allowed to do that? Because I see this January.
It does say January. We would have to add that if we wanted to continue that. Chairman Straka. But that would be up to the governing board.
Not that we're doing it tonight, but we used to do it on an off election year.
So how many readings do we get on these?
Two.
Only two, okay. So before they're adopted, so if we wanted to change any of the wording, then we have to do it now.
Now or before the next
Give
meeting.
her the feedback and then we would not put it on the consent agenda and we would discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay, I will send you every change.
And we will add it to the next.
All right.
Confusing agenda, and I've been on the board for quite a few years. This was the most confusing agenda I've ever read.
Well,
And it was,
there's some.
I don't know if it was just what I was doing or I had to use the computer instead of a book. I don't know.
I know,
It just, I've got some other comments, so it'd be better to I just call you and tell you.
We can spend some time together, or it's up to you. That's why if you wanna.
Go ahead with some of the comments because your comments may reflect other board members as well.
I know that the one with the missing children,
Yeah.
when they quoted all these different state statutes and not one of them addressed missing children. I think it referred to, let's see here, where do I have missing children?
You're talking about JLH, correct?
And
Missing
it's-
students?
The only thing they changed is within 5, they made it 10 days.
For missing children? No, I went and looked at each of the state statutes that it was referencing. And it's such a discombobulation. It makes no sense. I'm sure if there was a missing child, we'd never,
I agree.
it needs to be, I think we need to scrap it.
Is there any other ASBAs out there?
So
Yes, there is.
There is. Actually, Susan was telling me about one.
Yeah.
But I would just, on this missing students. When I look at this and then I think about people that were not born in this country, there is no way somebody not born in this country could meet one of those requirements. And we are not required to, for proof of citizenship to enroll in a school. So then how would you do a missing student if they're a unregistered alien?
So my understanding of the reason that the policy is in place and is drafted is in the instance where you may have a child that was abducted, or if there is a custody issue and a parent may take the child out of one district and try to enroll them somewhere else. So that's why they flag that record. So in case the custodial parent calls the school and says, hey, my ex-husband withdrew my daughter last week, you can flag that record and that parent wouldn't get that information. So it was more or less to protect any child that was in a potentially dangerous situation. So to your point, if there was a child that was from another country, if someone, whether it was a parent in another country or someone in this country, were to make that same phone call. So it's not really getting into the validity of whether or not the student is able to register. It's more or less to protect any child that potentially should not be registered by another party.
Okay, if you.
The whole missing student heading throws me off a little because I'm not sure how they're defining missing student. I think there's a different interpretation of what
To
that
me, a
really
missing
means.
student is they've been kidnapped.
I can't get beyond that.
And that would not be this.
Every situation is gonna be different
Mhm.
with a missing child. Why they're even trying to address it this way is crazy.
And so and like I said, in the event of a custodial dispute, if a non-custodial parent were to take a child outside of the court's recommendation, that is a legal issue. It's a law enforcement issue.
We don't have to do anything.
And then I don't know if you want to go through any of the rest of them, but the other ones were date changes, or did you all want to discuss each one by one? Did you have any notes from the ones that we skipped over?
I'm really not happy with just about any of them. It's with you, you know. Yeah. You know, I was looking at something else. It was the Trust Alliance model policy. And I would like to add this to our next agenda. So I'll wait to talk about that, but I think they stick a lot more to state statute, what it says. So when they're, you know, quoting state statute, they align with it. And that doesn't mean, no, we shouldn't be reading them, but to me, if it's a law, it's like taking a verse out of the Bible and then changing it to what you want it to say. And so I'm really like done with that, so.
Elizabeth, if you would like to pull together maybe 6 or 7 examples of the difference between the two and like give that to
I
us.
definitely, I would send it to Kathy.
We can just do a little analysis.
Yeah, it's just like this emergency one, they have to, it's like they have to add something to get paid or something, they have to change something. Emergency response plans developed by the governing board are required to address how the school and emergency responders will communicate with and provide assistance to students with disabilities. I think the emergency people know what to do.
Well, and if there's an emergency, is anyone gonna say, oh, wait, Johnny's in a wheelchair, let me see what the plan says on how to move him?
Right. I mean, it's just
If
crazy.
the building's burning down, you're gonna get him out however you can. I would hope that someone wouldn't run into the burning building to open up a plan to say, oh, it says we take the handles of the wheelchair and talk to him gently and roll him out. No, just get.
And Shirley Tom has done a great job with this. She was aware of this change and she wanted to make sure that there were plans in place if there were any students that had disabilities needed to be evacuated, so.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're sorry, thank you. So we're up to the consent agenda. Before I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, I always like to ask, is there anything anybody would like to pull from the consent agenda?
Yes,
Ms. Wiley?
like for 1, 5, and 6.
1, 5, and 6.
You say line 6?
So you're to recommend the personnel action, the ASBA 2 policies and the policy sex offender notification.
J1, what was the next one, sorry?
1, 5,
Number 5 and 6, the ASBA recommendation of JIC DD and addition to policy manual JLIF sex offender notification. Anybody else have anything? I'm gonna assume Mr. Miglerino doesn't have anything. Anything to pull from the consent agenda, sir?
No.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items 1, 5, and 6. Can we do that, Ms. Brown?
Is there a motion?
Wiley, would you like to make a motion?
you can prove,
All but 1, 5, and 6?
yes. 1, 5, and 6.
2 through 4 and 7 through 11. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Since it is consent agenda, we'll have no conversation. Are you ready for the motion? Yes, you are. All right, it is on your laptop. All right,
Would you like to move those action discussion items before the current action discussion items, or would you like to move them to the end?
let's move them to the beginning. I'm hoping they'll be quick.
Can you give me a minute to move those?
Yep.
I want to do it now.
Do them now, just because they're fresh on your mind and we can move quickly.
In this, the first one is probably a real simple answer, but it says new hires, Dawn Lopez, resignations, Dawn Lopez. Did she start and stop the same day?
No, I'm trying to think of Don Lopez. I think that I'd have to look at that, Miss.
It's just.
I guess,
My eye, and I
reason
thought
why she was on there twice.
she
I-
might know.
Yeah.
Don
Thank
Lopez,
you. I know the name, I just can remember the situation. Thank you.
Chairman Wiley, Don Lopez was an adult ed dental instructor
Okay.
that came on board.
Oh,
And found very quickly how challenging it was going to be and how fast going in. And the Friday before class was to start on Monday, she resigned.
Okay, I kind of thought maybe.
so,
Is she
But-
a new teacher?
She was an evening teacher for adult education.
Adult education.
but if the board hasn't approved her for hire, can she start?
She was one of the teachers, I do believe, Holly, that we were hoping we could start a little early to learn the program with the.
Okay, so she was observing,
That's,
she was observing and she figured it. So, but if we haven't hired her, can she resign?
well, we just put both
Okay,
things on there, so.
Is it good enough? that's good enough.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Wiley, would you like to make a motion to approve item number 1 now? Any other questions?
We have to
You
do
guys
one.
give me a minute. Moving things around.
Okay, so let's move number 5 and we can maybe do them all.
Make sure it's all right with the boss.
Yeah, can we discuss all of them, then we'll do one motion?
Well,
Number 5?
let me get back to number
No,
1 though.
I'm sorry, they've been separated, so
Okay.
I'm almost done if you guys just.
Okay, well, can we discuss number 5 while we're waiting for number 1 to come up? No, you have a question on 1?
Yeah, I got for someone.
Go ahead.
So I'm hearing some of these over the year, we've had a couple of employee actions. Did we ever, I don't think we've ever seen feedback exactly of what the situation was, so that we're tracking if there is any issues. Something that maybe the board can help remedy, if there's an issue like training, there's an issue of hours, there's an issue of access, something that maybe we can help identify. If someone just walks off the job as an adult, shows up, walks off the job, that's, to me, that's an indicator that maybe there's something there that we should be discussing. Maybe some room for improvement so that we're not losing teachers like that. I mean, you agree to a wage, you make the commitment, you show up to work. What was so bad that they turned around and walked out?
Yeah, what did they miss telling them?
Yeah, I mean, there's gotta be something there. I mean, an adult making, was it $36 an hour? I mean, that's. I don't know, to me, it's.
So because Dr. Erb had and you track every hire and reason they leave. So
The retention data at the end of the year. One of the things that I typically do if I hear about a resignation, because I'm usually in contact with the principals. When they call to let you know that someone is thinking about resigning, it could be a number of reasons. It could be, family moving out of town. It could be, we kind of want you to resign. It's not necessarily a bad idea. So we kind of do have that information. Board Member Garcia, I'm just trying to think of the best way, other than the retention data that we give you at the end of the year, how we could get that information to you. Because, I mean, did you want it once a month? Did you want to kind of wait until the end of the year and get more of a summary? Like, these are the.
This is the board's recommendation on that as a whole,
The
but
summary is good because you're
Yeah.
following it,
Right.
so you could summarize it and then maybe look at some changes.
I would look for indicators. I mean, so is it, because even if they say we wanted them to be gone, then that was a staffing issue. And we should have seen it from the staffing or the backgrounding. So that again is our fault. If it's a classroom issue that maybe there's something there that they didn't like, again, that's our fault. We gotta own some of these things. If the teacher was just overwhelmed as a personality, then you can put the onus on them, but there's some things in there that we can identify, talk about, bring to the front. And try to resolve, so we don't keep doing this. You know, if we keep having that open door, that revolving door, that doesn't look good on efficiencies of any industry.
Well, one of the things that anecdotally I've seen since I've been here at West-MEC is that I think we do a really good job of indoctrinating teachers who may not have had a traditional teaching path. Because if I come from industry as a hairstylist, it's a whole different world for me if I have to plan a curriculum, deal with student discipline, deal with parents, do all the other things that teachers have to do. So I think in some instances, when we see those quick resignations, a lot of it is, you know, this really just wasn't a good fit. Yeah, the money was good and the benefits were great, but I'm an industry person. I think I'm gonna go back to. But we do have those systems in place for those teachers who do want to make it a pathway. They, you know, they go through the PD department to get trained. So I think at the end of the year, we'll take a look at that and really see, you know, like how long was the person here? What was their tenure? What was their reason for leaving? Because we do track that in HR.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Can we, you talked about it doing it at the end of the year, is this something that maybe we could see on maybe quarterly basis or something like that, and just kind of keep track of the reasons why they left, you know, all that kind of stuff. How long they were with West-MEC, when did they start? What was the, you know, were they terminated or, you know, whatever. I think those are good things to see, and I think that's
quarterly as opposed to annual.
yeah, I'd like to see, yeah.
Or maybe just
because
at
you
the
can
end of
see a
each
trend.
semester.
Yeah.
Each semester.
Okay.
And you know, I mean, trying to keep, you know, have our teacher retention, I think that, or any employee retention is really a major part of West-MEC and their success. So, yeah, exactly. So we need to see that. We need to nip it in the bud before it starts. So I'd like to see that.
Okay, that takes care of the conversation there.
Okay.
So if everybody refreshes, you should be able to see the 3 items in action discussion.
Okay.
So go down to action discussion continued in section J, and you'll see item number 1, recommendation to approve personnel action items.
God, I have to rejoin the meeting.
I do too.
Didn't like it at all.
Okay, so a motion to approve the personnel action?
Pardon me.
Do we have a motion to approve the personnel action?
We're gonna do them all, 2, 5, and 6.
She said we had to do them separately.
Oh, okay, fine.
Motion first one.
Made by Juan, seconded by
I'll second.
Ms. Bosom. All right, all in favor?
Oh,
And then Ms. Wiley, why that's coming up, if you want to start the next conversation.
number 5, and this is probably just a typo, but on definitions, it says evidence of a person's biological sex includes, but is not limited to, any government issued identification document that accurately reflects a person's EX. Should be sex.
Okay.
That's all. I just, but it's an important piece of it, so.
For catching that.
And when you look at it, it like jumps out of the page at you, so I'm surprised they missed that.
I mean, I think, you know, I like the policy, but just that's.
All right, so is there a motion to approve that policy then, with that change?
I'll make motion.
And seconded by, okay, made by Ms. Bosom, seconded by Mr. Garcia. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we can have the vote pop up.
Sorry, I typing with the. To spelling, okay. Okay, so motion by,
Ms. Bosom, seconded by Mr. Garcia.
okay.
And moving on to the sex offender notification.
Okay, now this one apparently is all new. Number
Correct.
6.
That is correct.
And it's a sex offender and dangerous juvenile offender notification and protective measures.
Yes.
My gut feeling is there's a policy somewhere out there that they handle this with. That we don't need to duplicate or try to fix it. Can I get some examples of, has this ever happened here at West-MEC? And is there past experiences? Is this necessary?
It is just a safety measure, or in case any of the public comes up and says, I'd like to see your I'm a parent and I want to make sure that you all are tracking any sex offenders that move in and out of the area where my kid goes to school. And we can produce.
There's a website they can go on and see.
They're asking that we go on the website, is what you're saying.
Right, because that's what we would do is Louisa already has come up with a process, if this is adopted, where she would capture any sex offender that moves in and out of the boundaries of any of our schools and keep that information in a binder. So just in case any parent were to ask for it, we would be ready to produce it.
So how do you know that they're a dangerous juvenile offender? Because juvenile records are sealed.
if there was a student that was an offender, we would get notification from the courts.
Okay, so it's not really, then if we get that notification, what do we have to do with that?
Now, wait a minute, is this a notification of a student in here?
That also, this policy is both a community member and a student.
Wouldn't the student, because he's been charged with something, have to tell you up front, hey, I'm a sex offender, but I want to take the automotive course?
I don't think that's captured anywhere. I'd have to ask.
And would you trust us?
I would think that there should be, because there's a site where they have them all, you could see where they live.
Yeah, but I think some of it also ties to access. So if someone walked on your campus and they're like, I don't know who that person is. They could look at it and say, well, they're not supposed to be here. Now, because they're a sex offender, doesn't mean they're gonna do the right thing all the time. I mean, some of those cats they're like that for a purpose. So, I think, I know for protection and safeguarding the students, if you can't recognize somebody's not supposed to be there and they're on your campus, you can't tell them you should have told me. They're gonna give you the middle finger and do what they do. So it's gonna be I think for our safety, I actually agree with this, to be able to be aware. Because I'm sure that we have people walking in my building and we don't know who they are. But our security team knows all this stuff. They take care of it.
Vice Chairman Straka and Board Member Wiley, it's not a new policy. It would be newly adopted for West-MEC. The policy has existed for school districts, many of which I think adopted. It demonstrates our awareness of those registered sex offenders that are in proximity to our campus and any juveniles that may pose that risk.
Vice Chairman Strug, I have a question. Are we actively going out there then with this policy, going out there and searching for this information, or we're just receiving it, retaining it for the parents to see?
We're noticed.
Okay.
And then Louisa would make a copy of it, put it in the binder. It has the person's picture, so you can physically see who they are.
And what if there's a situation where we miss someone and we don't have them in there and we get caught? Someone finds out, okay, you didn't tell me this person was not in your folder and they went and did something. And now are we liable? Are we responsible for something for not
That's a great.
updating our folder, binder, or whatever, wherever you keep this information?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we could even have an employee, the same thing, that may have committed some type of crime, and we just don't know. But you know, again, this is just a measure that we are for the ones that we can identify. And I mean, it would be I just don't know if there would be any other way, because I do know that sex offenders have to register anytime they change a location. So I think as long as they're registering, we should know. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause that's my concern, what are the consequences to the school if we don't have an up-to-date binder? When there are all these other resources out there that all adults can go in and search online. Why is it the school's responsibility to track these people?
I think it's a service.
The first line on here says Arizona statutes require law enforcement agency. So we already know that they're required to give it to the district.
Correct.
So why do we have to do this?
So what this does is it tells the district, we will establish a procedure on how to disseminate that information.
So
So
you have it, now we got to say how we're going to spread it out.
how we're going to disseminate what the procedure is.
And I think that's what covers us, is that we got the information, we have a process in place, and we can notify any parent, if a parent does ask, we're doing our due diligence to keep our students safe.
I think that, you know, I think it is a good thing to cover us for something like this, but I would like to see some timeframes as what to do when. You know, we have a certain amount of time to do that. I think those are some things that should be added too.
Yeah, have we ever had a case like that on the campuses?
I've just been here.
Oh.
So I personally can't answer that question.
I'll
Sure.
We've not had the request for that information, and again, none of what this policy would introduce is in itself, it's self-imposed, so the board is adopting a procedure or a policy that would have us create the procedure to make available information that law enforcement shares with us regarding sex offenders upon request. So it's not our responsibility to make sure that we're the informant to all of the community. It's
Right.
upon request.
Okay, upon request, but right now today, without this policy, if I have a kid, can I come in, knock on the door here at West-MEC and say, do you have any sex offenders in your area or on your thing, right?
Right now, without the policy, we would not have that information available.
Correct. Now, in my last 2 districts that I worked for, we did have the policy. And they actually put the pictures in the employee break room. I thought that was a little much, but you know, again, the district was just doing their due diligence to have that information available to the community. So.
Well, if you're gonna do it, that's a good idea. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion from somebody
I'm motion, what am I motion on?
to approve the sex offender notification?
Yeah, motion to accept the policy.
Is there a second?
And I'll second it, but again, I would like to see some dates and stuff.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question.
Motion carried.
Moving on. Welcome back.
Mr. President Pro Tem, members of the boards, Superintendent Dr. Spurgeon, colleagues and community members, thank you for letting me come back up and ask for the approval of our revised annual financial report. So let me, excuse me, let me just first, I think 2 months ago when I was here, I said, hey, we're adopting a AFR, but I'm pretty sure it's wrong. There were a couple things that were very glaring right up front. Really just a few. One, as I was going through the whole process, what I do is I take all the accounting data out, actually upload it into software to kick out any illegal codes we have. I give those illegal codes to accounting team and say, hey, you need to journal entry these, they're in illegal codes, get them out. They did as I continued to run through the process. And we're putting all the data into the annual financial report. There were a few things that were glaring, one of them being that we overspent our ESSER funds. So knowing that we're gonna spend them, if we upload that to the state, they would say, revise your AFR and kick out those funds. So I think it was about $200,000 or $300,000 overspending our ESSER funds. The second was, as I'm going through, we're also required to identify our capital asset listing. And when I asked the team, where is that? They had consultants working on that, but we're not gonna have the information in time for the AFR approval with the board. So I had no data on that. So I literally put in last year's capital assets. So I knew right off the bat, 2 different areas were wrong. And then also it had that we made no interest payments out of our debt service, which were paid back bonds, which I know means we paid back interest. So 3 different areas, not huge, not horrible, but something that is not easily correctable within the day or 2 that I had to put it all together. So I just had to say, I'll give you a list of things to work on. You'll have a couple months to work on them. And we'll come back to the board to present the AFR. So that is the revised AFR. I'm not going to go through every one because I will tell you, as I've had to identify for our 915 letter for ADE to allow us to resubmit a new AFR, it's touched 188 different cells within this report. And so I have to go through and put the old value and the new value in every single one and then get that to Ms. Brown so that she could send another letter to ADE asking for it. I tried to do it without, and they rejected it and said we need to know every single place that it changes. So be that as it may, just in summary, I think Ms. Brown worked with me on the agenda item just to really summarize quickly. M&O changed. It did increase by 300,000. Remember, we had to pull some money out of ESSER and move it somewhere. At that time, I had no idea where we were moving it. I didn't know what our ESSER grant was. I didn't know what the ESSER budget was and where it was. So I didn't know what we were moving and where. But that happened. And then also we had to increase some expenditures in our capital fund by $200,000. So basically those 2 funds had about $500,000 shift in going out of grants and into that. There were a few other journal entries as the staff here was working. They said, hey, we also noticed this was coded wrong. Can I move this? And it might have moved it in a cell or a couple of them moved funds. And I said, yeah, you got a 2-month window. If you want to clean up anything in the old year, do the journal entries and do all that. And so this is the result of all that work. The only caveat is that I just heard today, we are uploading and submitting our federal grants now. I just heard another district, they just got theirs returned and have to revise their AFR because the state rejected some of their expenses in it. I have not looked at what our grants and all the different grants that are, what's going into the completion report and the final, the feds, because their fiscal year doesn't end until end of September. You got until December 31st to submit your completion reports. Until they approve that, everything's still live and could be changing. So although I think this is our final AFR revision, depending our submission to the state on grants management for those grants, it could revise again if they reject that, and then we'll have to move it and adjust to it. But this is the best that I know at this time. Any other questions or any questions?
We're just looking for an approval based on what we know today.
Yeah.
Move the revised budget. I move it.
Is there a second? All right, that's, I guess, Mr. Ramirez was fraction of a second ahead, so we'll go with him. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. It was made by Mr. Migliorino, seconded by Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
And thanks, Paul. That's tedious, I know.
It's a great team here, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Mr. Migliorino, I'm still waiting for your vote. Did you vote?
No. Oh, I didn't think I should do it. Any recommendation?
Well, you know, I was told once by somebody, don't make these meetings last so long.
Oh, God, Frank, you're the king. No, he's a
Hey. Okay, so now that was the 22-23 school year, and we have similar for 23-24.
We already gave the presentation, we have the budget.
So we can just go with the, based on his presentation. So I would entertain a motion to approve as presented at the budget hearing.
Motion to approve the 2023-24 revised expenditure budget.
By Mr. Ramirez, is there a second? Mr. Garcia? We'll call for the question if there's no more discussion.
Approve the rest of the consent agenda.
Yeah, you were in the restroom. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
No, you were here. You were back because we waited for you to.
We just want the time.
Oh, that was,
Still waiting for your vote. There we go.
All right, moving on. Right, so this is next item is number 6. Discussion and possible action about vacation and sick leave policy related to accrual and buyback provisions. This is following up the conversation we had last March.
Didn't we adopt this on August 9th?
Right, but we had never gone back and we had discussions and we wanted to make changes in March and we never had a chance to discuss it. August, we approved everything. We approved all the policies. So they could get it into board book.
Okay, but my question is, we're looking at this now, but we already approved it. Isn't it kind of?
So this is to modify.
Well, change or not, it's still in midstream, and I don't know if that's in West-MEC's best interest. I think it should talk about it when the time comes, when those changes are due.
So we tried to discuss things in August and Dr. Pingarelli said we needed to prove everything. And we moved everything all at once. Because that's when we discussed afterwards. So we said, hey, we should take the policies by letter group and review one letter each month because a lot of the policies, I don't want to say are outdated, but as an example, if there aren't 4 people present 15 minutes before a board meeting, there is policy that we can cancel the board meeting. How often do we have 4 people here ahead of 15 minutes before the board meeting? And so I think some of our policy, we approved everything without reviewing them.
so who decides whether we follow policies?
The chairman. But the board should be following the policy.
Oh, that's my point. Thank you.
But, you know, if we're going to discuss it, and if we have to come in early, then we can be asked.
So this is the policy that we discussed in March, and I had been asking to have on the agenda as an action item since March.
It was on last month.
And my mother was dying. And that's why it was postponed.
That's what it was last month.
I remember that's what it popped up.
Yeah.
Postponed.
So there's a couple of things here that I think we're putting employees at risk. As well as so there's two things I'd like to, one is if we want to become a world-class organization. You'll see the top Fortune 100 companies all have employees take their vacation. Because as an example, have you ever tried to think about something? It's like the name's in the back of my mind, the name's in the back of my mind. I can't remember it until I walk away. That's that creativity of your mind. And so if you're working at your job day to day, not taking vacation, it's stifling creativity. And there's a lot of studies out there that will tell you about that. So what I think we should do to encourage world-class creativity is encourage employees to take their vacation time instead of having a 40-day rollover, reduce that to 40 hours because you need some buffer that at the end of the fiscal year, because I worked at an organization, it was 0. But then if you started January, you didn't have any vacation, couldn't really take anything till March. You had to borrow time. So what I would propose is that we encourage employees, instead of having a 40-day rollover, have a 40-hour rollover. And that way they take the time, we get that creativity. Does that make sense? And so what I would change on the vacation policy simply is, instead of saying 40 days, change it to 40 hours. They may carry up to 40 hours in the next fiscal year. And it becomes a use or lose.
So I voiced this last time, is I really don't wanna do the thinking for adults. I think we give them the benefit, they use it how they want. That's their body, their mind, it's their performance. We're gonna get the performance either way, and they're gonna be not here very long.
Right.
So I as an employee would not want my employer to tell me.
So here's the flip side. You have 3 employees working for you. They all carried 40 days over for next year. They all use those 40 days plus the vacation they accrue. You essentially with the vacation they accrue and the holiday pay, you will lose 1 employee for the year. If they all max out and use it the next year, you will lose 1/3 your staff. So can you imagine multiplying that by West-MEC? Could we operate with 1/3 our staff on vacation for the whole year?
But they don't take it all the step. Right now with the state, we earn 180 hours a year. And we're not all taking 180 hours a year, and we're certainly not all
And
taking
that's
on
the
same
point,
day.
is at some point they will take it.
Well, that's
And
up
then
to the
you-
manager to manage that. That's what a manager's job is, to manage the schedules of their employees.
But if they all want to take the time, I have the
manager
time.
Says no. It's a requirement of the school that the school has to operate at a certain particular level.
But that's not what about in the office?
It doesn't matter, it's the manager. The office manager manages his people. They manage the work and the daily work of that employee. So for anybody that works for a company or an organization, you have a boss. Everyone has a boss. They manage the work, the time, they manage what time you come in, what time you go. They approve leave for that matter, and whether or not they're gonna allow you to take that. Now, some of those liberties are pretty liberal, but some of them are very conservative. It depends who you work for. You're at Palo Verde, it's a shift situation. No one can take leave unless there's 2 things that are met. One is seniority, and the other one is whether or not someone could be in your place. If you're on a regular job that is not on a shift type environment, it's what your manager says. If you say, hey, boss, I want to take off Friday, he says, oh no, we got things to do. It's declined. That's the workplace. So I don't think putting in these rules arbitrarily is gonna help. It takes away that flexibility for someone to be able to manage their own day, and I would never put.
It takes away the creativity too, because people don't take
Well, I'm not a
vacation.
scientist and you're not a scientist, so. we're not
There's
gonna get-
studies, so there's several studies out there,
And there's
because
lots
that's one of the
studies
things
out
I
there.
looked at.
I wouldn't get involved in that at all, so, but
I
I
mean, if
would.
we're gonna make this decision, let's use data out there.
Well, so
Which-
then call an ASU, NAU and U of A to come up with the conclusion of what they feel is in the workforce right now. And if you're gonna talk about what the norms are for workforce, you probably have to bring in a specialist of that area, maybe you have them give a presentation of what's the normacy of that out there. If you wanna talk about psychological impacts of hourly wages and work, call the Department of Labor. So there's a lot of organizations you can call in to do that, but I wouldn't, as a board member, want to take away one of the employees' rights of having flexibility of when they take their leave and how much of the leave they take. Unless I heard from any of the superintendents that that's what they prefer. I'm here to support the school as well as the budget, so yeah, I
But it becomes a budget item. You can have, we're allowing buyback, and when they leave, they could have 8 weeks of vacation buyout, which is gonna affect your budget. So converting to a use or lose is why a lot of banks are at zero.
well, we're not a bank, we're a school.
But we're still a school, we have a, you know, we talk about fiduciary, you just talked about budget. So I'm saying, if you allow those hours to carry forward, they carry forward with a raise. So I carried forward 40 days and then I leave. And we gave a $15,000 raise last year. So I gave 8 weeks of pay with a $15,000 raise and they leave. So it becomes budgetary, and then how do you, then the next year you've created a budget situation, I have to buy out 48 weeks of pay, and I have to hire a teacher the 1st of August.
All the teachers don't take leave off at the same time, but they did a comparison right here of all the schools. And so they did the hard work for us. So as an academic institution, which is the industry that we're in, it tells you right here what everyone's doing. Not the banks, not the financial institutions, but the academic institutions. And it tells you what everyone's doing. So as long as we're comparable and competitive, I think that's where we need to be. I would refer to the board's other opinion of mine, actually.
Vice Chair, Ms. Banks, I have a question. Right now, obviously, this is a school, so we're not on campus every single day, every day of the year. What are the breaks that the school currently has, and how many days does that accumulate to?
Well, there is winter break, which is 2 weeks. There is a spring break where the employees can choose 3 days between a certain period of time. I'm gonna say it's between February and March.
How many days is that?
3 for spring break. Then, of course, there are the holidays, the federal holidays. And
Okay. And those obviously, you don't deduct hours from vacation pay.
right, those are
Periods, okay.
benefits.
Well, and yeah, I was looking at this chart too, and also the comparison with all the different schools, the 40-day, and I forgot who I spoke to on the phone. It might have been you actually a month or two ago that I went over this with. And it does take basically the scenario I think that you mentioned, Mr. Struck, is that would happen in the 5th year if that individual, that employee didn't take any vacation days for 4 years straight, and then on the 5th year, they accumulated their 10 plus their 40. So that's a long time before they're able to do anything like that. I find it highly unlikely that most people, I'm sure there would be one or two people that might do that, but I don't see that being as a common practice amongst most employees.
And according to Jack's analysis last year, Dr. Earp's analysis last year, there were only 10 employees that had 40 days.
Only 10 employees that had 40 days. And I'm assuming those employees have been with West-MEC a lot longer than 5 years.
Correct.
So they're also accumulating at a higher rate than.
Correct.
And I would go back to, you really can't tell people they can't take vacation because you end up with a discrimination suit. So let's just go down the road here. Let's say you have Ms. Bosom, Juan, and Barbara. And Barbara's shortest seniority. They each ask for a 3rd year off. What would you tell Barbara?
In terms of vacation. Well, it depends on her schedule. I mean, I would defer again to their department and their boss.
Okay, so if you tell her no, do you know you just discriminated and why?
Well, again, so what we need to do is follow and be competitive. That's my stance, and to be competitive. And I wouldn't want to tell an employee use it or lose it. Because
We do that now, but with 40
well,
days.
you do that, but there's a lot
No,
of. there's
we
a
do
lot of
that
things-
now with 40 days. They have to use it or lose it. So we're lowering the threshold.
Well, I wouldn't wanna lower it. I like to keep it where it's at. I don't see a reason for change. The teachers that I talk to are happy with the school. So what does that mean exactly? It could be the benefits package, it could be a lot of things. A deep dive, if you really wanna deep dive what they're saying. Maybe a good survey of what they want in terms of benefits should go out there. We should hear from the front line of what they believe is their attractive piece that they like about the school. And if it is their benefits and it is their flexibility in that regard, then we keep it. I don't see any reason to make the teachers upset. And I don't see any benefit in our budget if we didn't do it or if we did do it. I mean, it's just basically picking at something. I wouldn't wanna do that.
So I would disagree. I think it's a financial decision. It's a thought leadership decision. I want people away so that they can come back and be creative and be refreshed. I can tell you the year that
Qualified to make that statement. You're not a doctor, you're not a
I
psychiatrist.
can tell you,
How do you make that decision? I
it's
don't
just like,
understand.
so
What's
the
your
work,
qualifications to make that decision?
so the work week is 40 hours.
Okay.
Do you know how we get 40 hours or where it
I'm
started?
sure historically, somewhere in the Department of Labor after the 1940s or the 1930s, they came up with that after the great hiring that they did in the industrial age. I'm sure in somewhere in labor law in the 1940s and the 1950s,
So-
came up with benefits and the benefit packages.
No, it came from Henry Ford. What he
Okay,
found was,
what period of time was he in?
he was in the 1930s. What he found was employees that worked over 8 hours made mistakes. So he said, we're not gonna have a workday more than 8 hours.
And Albert Einstein took naps. I mean, so what do you, I mean,
Okay.
he didn't even sleep.
But again, you asked, where did this come from? So it's the same thing. People need time to refresh or they make mistakes.
That's what we have managers for. We have managers and directors who do their job, and that's part of their job is to manage the work of the employees that they are given. That's part of their job. I don't think the board should govern their job in that regard. Who's performing?
I would like to make a motion, we table this until 2028.
The other one, so the other issue is sick time. And a similar thing, but what we're doing is it's related to FMLA. We're allowing employees to sell back their sick time, but if they have a FMLA emergency and they run out of sick time and they still need time off, what happens is they don't have any hours left. They don't get paid, but also we cannot pay their benefits. So it's kind of the same thing. We're allowing employees to make a mistake that comes back to bite them later. And then we cannot legally, and I talked, Ms. Mays can confirm this, if you don't have any benefit hours, we cannot pay your benefits. So if they have 0 hours of sick time or vacation time because they sold it back, they don't get paid, but also if they want to keep their health insurance because they're sick or a family member's sick, they have to pay the full $1,800 a month. And so this just allows them not to sell it back so that they have time that if they have a health emergency, they can get paid, but their benefits would be paid.
Again, that's their.
Yeah. I understand that concern, but I'm also. I don't think we should dictate how adults should be using their time, sick time, vacation time. Everyone makes that decision and takes that risk on their own. If they want to put themselves in that situation, that's their decision. That's not one for us to make, I think.
I'd like to call for a question.
Let me make one comment. There are two comments that I've heard made. Why, this dialogue is good. I think you said something about it takes 5 years to accumulate.
Yeah,
So the employee would have to be here 5 years before they would be able to do this.
without taking any vacation
Without
time.
no vacation.
Then on their fifth year.
And
they
the other
can-
thing is that there's only 10 employees that have qualified for this. So I kind of agree with what Juan just said, that they're adults.
So you're saying that only 10 employees are eligible to sell back
Yeah.
sick time or vacation time?
Or vacation time.
Yeah.
And there are 20 employees that have 55 days that could sell back 10 days. But that's the maximum they can sell back. They still have to, if they decide to sell, they still have to keep 55 days on the books. And they could only sell whatever's over 50, a maximum of 10 days over 50.
Okay, well, there's no motion. So we can move on. Last item, number 7, possible action concerning Arizona. Dr. Spurgeon, this is.
I don't know if you want to rehash this conversation we had at the budget hearing, so it's the same exact information around the AD calculation and the SIS tool, so there's a summary written there of exactly what I said when Mr. Hicks was up here. So unless you wanted me to discuss this again.
We don't know 40 millions done.
What might be interesting for some people is I'd love to just give me 2 seconds. He mentioned a 30-minute presentation on how ADM is calculated.
Okay.
Would that be possible for members who would like to hear it, not as part of a board meeting, but as a special meeting to just maybe a Zoom or something in the next 30 to 60 days?
Yeah. Ken?
That's, yeah, part of things I was gonna ask for our next agenda, I'd like to see.
Are we still on number 7?
Yes.
Okay, so
Is there any action we need to do for number 7? There's nothing new, so I think, but not a board meeting. I just think it's a 30-minute off, whoever would like to
do you
attend.
want to request that future agenda?
Yeah, but it's not really a agenda, it's a,
Which is.
Okay.
So there's no action that's gonna be taken on this?
nope. So we're on future agenda items.
Question, Mr. Record is, if there are gonna be more than 3 board members, does that rule apply? Does it have to be a public meeting if we're all gonna be?
It just, board members may be present, no action will be taken, is I think the notice you send
The
out.
study session, there, it does need to have a quorum of board members for it to be a public meeting, open to the public. So, we can do it through Zoom and have it live streamed if you, wanted to have a live meeting. If it's not going to be a quorum, it's just gonna be information presented, it's not, there's not.
I was
a public
wondering
meeting.
if, yeah.
But we have to take count, see who's gonna be there,
Yeah.
who's not gonna be there, but, if,
When we go to like the NSBA or ASBA and we have more than 4 board members, they just publish something like a quorum may be present, but no business will be discussed. Can we do something like that?
you could, but it is.
Well,
this
just let's see how many we
is this
get.
Information that you think the public is going to be interested in listening and hearing about? Because you're discussing this in a public meeting, is this information you want open to the public to attend?
Let's see how many we get and then we can go from there.
Mhm.
Any other agenda items?
Good to ask for, they put stuff on the agenda. One of the things that I know a couple of board members have asked for it is, the mileage. Approved mileage stipends and have that report done of, what the mileage. What's been taken, and we haven't seen that yet, and that was supposed to be when we agreed on it. There's supposed to be a quarterly report, and we've never seen one report. I would definitely like to see that by next month.
Yes, so if you look in the board letter, it's actually contained within the board letter of the mileage report that's for each of the individual that's required to
It
report
was
that,
sent
so it's
out.
there.
Okay,
Yes.
So we have October, January, and
March
and June.
yeah, well, yeah, maybe do a presentation or something like that on the mileage report.
Perfect.
Um,
Then just say it, just.
Just send us the
it'll
link
just
to
tell
where
you.
it's at.
Yeah, just when if you go to your board, report for October, it's in the month of October, I'm not sure which week it is, but it's listed right there for the 4 individuals that are required to report that, so it's there.
I also wanted to see some kind of a spreadsheet on employees that have left West-MEC. Dr. Erb had done one when we were, I think that was done in January or whatever. But I'd like to see something maybe done quarterly and maybe have something for next month's meeting. Yeah, I would like to see the reasons that people are leaving. You know, whether they're retired, did they relocate, did they get promoted and or leave for an increased salary? What were the reasons for leaving, or were they terminated? You know, what campus are they from? Job titles, hire date, term date, what the West-MEC salary was. If we know what their new salary was and the time that they were employed here at West-MEC. And I'd like to have something similar. I was thinking about having the ADM. I'd like to see something, you know, kind of compare, you know, what our ADM is each month, you know, and just have that updated so we can keep an eye on that. And then I would like to have a study session. If everybody would approve it, and it's, let me find what the name of this place is, I forgot. It's called the Trust Alliance Model Policy. I would like to maybe get them in here to do a presentation to see what kind of policies they write and replace them with the ASBA. I believe that Ken is on the board of directors there, and maybe he can do the presentation.
I'm on the board, but we have a parent that you can bring.
Okay, all right. Here.
I would seeing, rumor has it the pricing is better than ASBA.
I think anything's better than ASBA.
Well, I meant pricing wise.
Yeah, I'm just not really pleased with the ASBA.
Ms. Susan, would it be possible, Ms. Mays, if she gave you the list, what she just listed there, wouldn't it be easier to just do it once a month in the personnel report? Just give her an Excel spreadsheet? Because that way it's only just a few folks that you're answering those questions for a month instead of doing it and having collected that data, or that way you'll have each month, you'll have who left, the reason they left, their position, their current salary. If there's about 8 or 10 different categories, so it might be for 3 or 4 employees a month, maybe more in the spring with the hiring. But it's that way you have a collection over a period of time rather than just having to do it once or twice a year where you got to go through and find 25 and 30 and 40 employees. That way, the information's fresh, it's open, it's right now, you've got it. So if we just did like an Excel spreadsheet in the personnel report of what you're asking for, that would probably be the easiest way to do it, because the information will be right here, right now, and be fresh.
Another question I had too, Ms. Wilson, did you want it just for this academic school year? Is that your?
I'd like to see continuing, you know,
I mean, but starting this school year?
We have it for the red, Dr. Herb provided for the rest of the year, so it'll be this year moving forward. But that just makes it easier to be able to collect that data on a regular basis.
You can see trends of what's really happening, you know, if there's a problem, you know, with you know, working here for West-MEC, and you know, we need to know about it, and that way we can address it right away.
And if Mr. Garcia addresses your same concern there, if there's things that we can do collectively as an organization to get better. If it's us, then what can we do to make it better? If it's them, there's not a lot we can do about that, but at least it gives you a monthly opportunity to be able to see what's happening. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
I felt something coming, then it stopped.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly a question, procedural question, stuff like that. Like in this section of asking for future agenda items, say I ask for something that the rest of the board says or thinks, I don't see a reason for that or a benefit to that. Is there a vote on if I make a request? It's like, no, we disagree with one.
There's 2 types of requests. One is just like a report or something, and you don't have to wait for a board meeting to, hey, I don't know. I want to know how many students went to Grand Canyon or something. Do we have that data?
Yeah.
You know, you can make that kind of request. This is more of a, what should we discuss at a future board meeting? Policy kind of thing.
Yeah. But can I bring up whatever I want and put on the agenda, or?
Will it have to be scheduled by, I mean, I would ask that you be within, you know,
Relative to
West-MEC, yeah. It's like, hey, I want to discuss, I don't know, but.
Just The other thing you can do is you can reach out to any one of our departments, and include me on the email if you want some information. You don't have to wait till once a month. If you said, hey,
Yeah.
Dr. Spurgeon, I'd like to, work with CJ or work with Mr. Welch. There's some information that you're looking for, you can always reach out to us and let us know.
Yeah.
Because typically when a board member reaches out and asks for a report, Louisa sends that report to the rest of the board when you request that.
It is all over campus.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait till it's once a month. If there's something that you need, text me, call me, or reach out. Just make sure you include me on the email if you're asking somebody of something.
And so to answer your question, let's say so one of the things we talked about is reviewing the policies. Do you think we should go back, we did a blanket approval for everything because we had several that hadn't been approved and we brought a few more back. Do you want to go back and read each section and send feedback to Kathy and say, hey, I want to review section A, January, section B in February? Because some of our policies haven't been looked at in probably 12 or 15 years. There's this new thing called the internet that probably wasn't when some of our policies were written. Should we review some of those? And then we would have that discussion. And if I'm the only one that feels that way, no, it doesn't get put on the agenda. But if you bring something up on, and Louisa will say, hey, I think this should be on the next board meeting. And then the chairman and superintendent will say, hey, this is when it can fit in with everything else. It might be January, it might be April. Hey, this would be a good thing to have with benefits. This would be a good thing to have with, first day of school in August. So that's kind of how agenda works. Does that kind of help answer your question as well? So on that, Barbara, I know you had talked about policy, looking at the policies. Does that make sense to do that? Do a chunk at a time each month?
I don't think so.
What does the rest of the board think?
I'm gonna send all my revisions to Kathy. Then you bring them on Friday.
How quickly can we get the group to come in and talk with us about?
Maybe wait until we get this other presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because we may just decide
We have
to,
to do all new policies.
What happens? So when we get that presentation, I think that's the other question to answer is, some of our policies have been refined by West-MEC, started with ASBA, but we've refined. What do we own? What don't we own that we would have to go back and do a policy revision?
My understanding, we own policies.
ASBA would argue differently that they're copyrighted.
Right, so the trust will actually in their presentation explain to you what the process will be.
Yes,
Okay.
and some districts have gravitated over to policy services.
So maybe let's see when that would fit.
Can we?
June 30th. But also remember, when we are with ASBA, we're also, what about ASBA? How does that play into our health benefits? Because if we leave ASBA, we lose our benefits package.
I think they're completely detached.
The policy services is separate from the membership. So
Okay.
you can be a member and not have policy services.
Okay,
So you're just, we're paying for policy services, we can.
because Jack said, I know Jack at one point said, hey, if you leave ASBA, you lose
You
the
can
benefits.
maintain your membership in ASBA, but just not participate in their policy services.
is that the only benefits is health benefits?
I think we're probably getting too far into the future agenda.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're correct. Point taken.
Okay.
All right, we're good, 8:05, thank you,
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Miglerino.
What? I don't know.
Yeah, second.
I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went against policy.
What,
The people who went against the policy.
what,
Have a liability.
so what are you saying? I'm,
Is there a liability for going against?
Have a great holiday, everybody.
Yeah.